Hello, welcome to Sky Studios in West London, where in 1 hour's time, the two candidates to be Prime Minister, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, will face questioning from Sky's Kay Burley and our audience of Conservative Party members in a special programme, The Battle for Number 10. And the news today has provided a stark indication of the challenges facing whoever emerges victorious in September, with interest rates raised and the Bank of England forecasting a prolonged recession for the UK. And let's not forget that we live in a time of rising global tensions from Ukraine to Taiwan. And many believe we are in the midst of a broader crisis of trust and integrity in our political system. Well, all of those issues and more are sure to feature in this evening's questioning of the two candidates. A little earlier, they arrived on site, met by Sky's CEO, Dana Strong, and the head of Sky News, John Riley. And the people who are going to be posing some of those questions are also here. Our select group of around 80 Conservative Party members have spent an hour or so enjoying the glorious weather outside here at the Sky campus, and most of them are now making their way to the studio. But luckily, a handful have very generously agreed to hang back with us to have a quick chat before they are rushed off into that studio to listen to what both of the candidates have to say. And we've got a chance to have a chat with some of them, joined here by Alex, Lottie and Mary. Thank you all very much for joining us. Most people, we understand tonight, are relatively undecided. What about you, Alex? Have you made your mind up yet?
I'm leaning towards Liz, but I think Rishi could still swing my vote, potentially, but
What does he have to say tonight that will make you think that's
my main issue I'm looking at is how are they going to help me buy a house in my lifetime, really? You know, it's almost nigh impossible for someone my age to pay rent and save for a deposit. So just saying I'm going to build more houses is not going to really cut it anymore. So
well, it's a thing specific to you, but it's a massive thing.
I think it's genuinely one of the biggest issues the Conservative Party faces, since it's one of the main reasons people become a Conservative. So I think it's a massive issue.
So housing for Alex. Lottie, what's the key thing you're interested in hearing about tonight?
Well, I think, looking forward to the 2024 general election should be on everyone's mind. So I think the candidate that we need is one that is going to win that.
Boris Johnson's big shoes to follow. Which of them do you think is more likely to be able to win over people who may not have voted Conservative in the past?
Well, I think at the moment, Rishi Sunak is maybe scarier to Keir Starmer, but we'll see what he has to say tonight.
and Mary, we're all talking about economics because of what the Bank of England has said today. Are either of the candidates, which of them do you feel economically is the stronger candidate?
Yeah, I haven't decided yet. That's why I'm here. And actually, I'm a care manager. My aim here to hear how they will tackle health and social care crisis.
So that's something you'll really specifically care about. Do you think either of them has a better track record on that up to now?
Yeah, now I don't know. That's why I'm here to hear, listening to what they will say tonight and see. Then I'll decide whom I'll vote for.
And that's it. At the end of tonight, we're going to need to know from you all. We really are. Thank you both very much. Well, we have asked Conservative members, people who can vote from up and down the country, to join us. A couple more here. Zaid and Claire, thank you both for hanging back and chatting to us as well. Claire, to you first of all, how hard a decision is it for you between these two candidates?
I'm very undecided. I have to say I'm very proud of the party putting some superb candidates forward. I don't think Labour ever had a woman prime minister or a prime minister from an ethnic background, so it's fantastic to see. And what I'm looking for is someone who can really answer those really serious questions post-pandemic, post-lockdown, and especially with cost of living. I think that's absolutely crucial.
Zaid, what are the big issues that you care about and that you want to hear about tonight?
As a graduate studying international development, I think that hasn't been on the agenda. Liz Truss as the Foreign Secretary, hopefully I'm willing to hear if she has any ideas or any plans for overseas development. I think it's something really, really important if we are going to have this global Britain going forward.
What do you think of her track record as Foreign Secretary?
Yeah, I think she has delivered. I think the trade talks that she has, the deals that she got, But again, I think I go back to that because I heard from the Treasury that they will be stopping any funds that are going abroad for overseas development, with a lot of money going towards Ukraine. So I want to hear a lot more when it comes to international development.
And Claire, we've had obviously high-profile Conservatives some who were in the race and who dropped out are now lending their support. We're still waiting to hear from Michael Gove. He's been pretty quiet, but Sajid Javid has announced that he's supporting Liz Truss. Does that make a big difference to you when you hear these big names and who is supporting who? Does it change your mind, or are you still really just focused on the policies?
I think I'm more focused on the policies. I think that's an incredible backing, but I'm interested in hearing about solutions to everyday lives, and that's what I'm going to look for tonight.
And Syed, in terms of what we heard today about the economy from the Bank of England, quite scary predictions for many. Both of the candidates have quite different takes on how they would solve this economically. Which of them do you think is perhaps the one that you would favour in terms of their economic solutions?
I think Liz, because I think she wants to help right now. Rishi in the long term. But I think it's a fantastic debate. I think it's very good economic policies on both sides. So it's nice to hear that.
Thank you both so much. And thanks to both sets of our audience members. We're going to let them now get a chance to get across to the main building and take their seats for this debate. Now, we asked them those questions, but they've also had a chance to submit questions. All of those who are in the audience tonight have got a chance to ask questions, and those questions are going to be put to the leaders, but making sure they answer those questions is Kay Burley. She's going to be making sure that they don't wriggle out of it and try and dodge the questions that the audience members really want to hear. We're also going to be watching today is Team Sunak and Team Truss. Now, they are very much going to be watching what both of their candidates say tonight, and also watching very, very closely political journalists up and down the country. Let's get the thoughts of our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Sam, it's been quite a day, hasn't it, in terms of the economics. Internationally, it's all going on off in Taiwan. What do you think are the big things we're expecting to hear tonight?
Well, I think tonight, Jane, you're going to hear two different visions, really two different alternative paths for the United Kingdom. Both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have pretty smooth patterns of what they want to say, both to the country but also to Tory members. But I think this week has put everything in a slightly different perspective, which is what makes tonight's special programme so interesting, whether it's what's going on in Taiwan with China joining Russia, slightly just undermining questions of stability and world peace, or whether it's those grim warnings that we heard from the governor of the Bank of England, and we have the warnings of recession and interest rates going up. And I think that's concerning many. And it's those issues that will be in the next Prime Minister's in-tray, and it's those issues, I think, that we're going to want to get under the skin of in the special programme at 8.
And you know, as we prepare for that, the polls, though, still seem to have Liz Truss on this unassailable lead. Is it really hers to lose now?
Well, if the polls are right, and that's always been an if in every contest we've ever covered, Jane, then actually, yes. You would think that the global turmoil and the domestic economic turmoil might currently help Rishi Sunak. He, of course, has been Chancellor, and now he could present his stability. But it's that stability that he's been, that continuity with his time as Boris Johnson's Chancellor, that doesn't seem to have done him any favours in this race. It's been Liz Truss promising change on the economy, that message going down with the members. But you just have to wonder whether a particularly good or bad performance from either candidate tonight could just change the race at a critical point. Because of a delay, Tory ballots have only really started going out today and for the next 7 days. And that's when people, Tory members, will vote. This will be the biggest event, freshest in their mind when they decide which way to go. That's why tonight's event is so critical.
It was really interesting what you were saying, because I think a lot of people, a lot of outsiders who maybe aren't members of a political party, will be looking at this debate and thinking, well, if you're a member of a political party, you care about the policy, you care about the politics, you'll be going on what their policies are. But what you're saying is actually fundamentally are quite a lot of Conservatives a bit starry-eyed, they actually go on the personality, they go on their gut and they go on who they like.
People like, in politics, a winner, and I think that's no surprise, and it's not to be sniffed at. They want a winner when it comes to leadership contests. They want a winner when it comes to a general election, and I think some of those dynamics have been playing out. But until now in this contest, what there have been is a series of debates, really, which have exaggerated the differences between the two candidates in this contest. It's meant quite a narrow focus, not on the issues, really, that voters focus on, but on the things that matter to the Tory members, the 160,000 people that will determine our next Prime Minister. I think tonight is about who's going to be the next Prime Minister, how they're going to deal with the biggest issues that will dominate their in-tray, rather than just how they're going to win this contest.
OK, Sam, thanks very much. While the whole country is following this debate and this contest, Conservative Party members are going to be the ones who will have the final say on who our next Prime Minister is. We are with Tory supporters across the country. Greg Milam is in Crewe and Liz Bates is in Walton-on-Thames. But first, let's go to Mari Aurora in Worcester.
Hi, yes, I'm in Worcester here, and I'm actually waiting for Tory members to arrive to watch that all-important debate on Sky News. But to start off with, I'm here with Mark, who's the leader of the Tory Council in Worcester. So, Mark, tell me, who are you voting for in this ballot?
We've got two really good, strong candidates, but at this point I'm not sure which one I'm going to vote for. I want to listen and I want to hear a little bit more what they've got to say and before I make my mind up.
What's the number one most important thing to Tory voters in Worcester?
I think just like anywhere, it's going to be the economy, and it's going to be who's going to be able to manage the economy best. We know we've got really difficult headwinds we're facing, and I want to see what both candidates promise in relation to economic management.
So difficult there for Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. They've got to impress people like Mark here. So we'll have to see whether they've done enough after that debate. Over to Greg Milam in Crewe.
Yeah, welcome to Crewe. Thanks, Mahari. This is one of those red wall states that the Conservatives won in 2019, that real push into the Labour heartlands in the North and the Midlands. And it's going to be critical at the next election for whoever is that next Conservative leader and Prime Minister to show they can deliver what was promised by Boris Johnson as leader in 2019. Now, the polls suggest at the moment that it is Liz Truss's to lose. Every time those voting Conservative members see her, it seems she consolidates that position as the leader. But there are still a few undecideds, and we will be speaking to some of them shortly. And what they want to hear, it's clear, is what that next leader will do for the north of England. Now, they've seen the way the wind is blowing. From what we're picking up, they believe that it is perhaps Liz Truss who's more in touch on things like housing and the NHS, issues in the north that people seem to be caring about right now. But they want to see a strong leader and they want to see someone who can deliver. So the next couple of hours could be pretty decisive here in Crewe and around the country. And we can go to Walton-on-Thames and my colleague Liz Bates now.
Thank you, Greg. And yes, I'm here in Surrey. This is traditional Tory territory, many of their heartland seats in this area. And as you can see behind me, we have gathered some Conservative Party members who are waiting to watch the battle for number 10, which is less than an hour away tonight. Many of them at this point leaning towards Rishi Sunak, they tell me. In fact, one of the members has already voted for him. Others, though, undecided, waiting to make up their minds, waiting to see what is said later on. What they care about is honesty, competence, economic credibility, and of course, who can win a general election. And in this area, that means holding back the threat of the Liberal Democrats. And look, it's those members sitting behind me and others like them who hold now the future of the Conservative Party and the country in their hands.
Liz, Mari and Greg, thank you both very much. Thank you all very much. We'll come back to you in a short while. Well, as I mentioned, we have two representatives of both of the candidates here. For Rishi Sunak, Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. And for Liz Truss, we're joined by the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng. Thank you both very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Mr Raab, to you first of all, how much of a blow was it to Team Rishi, I suppose, as it is, Sajid Javid giving his support to Liz Truss?
Well, I think at this stage in the campaign, I mean, you'll get this ebb and flow, but the reality is Rishi won with the most MPs in every round of this, and if you want key endorsements, at this point in time, with the announcement today from the Governor of the Bank of England, inflation rising, interest rates going up, I think the fact that Nigel Lawson, Thatcher's very own tax-cutting chancellor, has endorsed Rishi, I think will be not only compelling for the public, but for members as well.
It is hard for Rishi Sunak, though, isn't it? You know, Sajid Javid is a good friend and somebody that he's clearly trusted and has been very close to in the past. And you would think that somebody you were that close to would be the one that would back you when it came to you running for Prime Minister.
This is politics. But what really matters, I think it's very timely to have this debate today, is there's one candidate in this race, and I've got huge respect for Liz. Kwasi, Liz and I have written books together, so we're old friends. But there's one candidate in this race who's been talking about the very serious risk of inflation, the impact that will have on interest rates, and has a credible plan to grip inflation and bring it down, as well as attract the business investment that we need, and then introduce tax cuts when it's responsible. And I think it's the right time to look and scrutinise very carefully the two economic plans to deal with the cost of living, because that's what's going to affect people most, much more than endorsements here, there or wherever.
Dominic, Rob mentioned there about Nigel Lawson, Chancellor in the 80s, and now he's concerned that Liz Truss will repeat those mistakes of the 80s. He's raised concerns about the fact that a lot of the stuff that she's promising isn't fully costed. Do you not think that this is a concern for a lot of Conservative Party members? They don't want to go back to those days, although they might like to go back to Thatcher. They don't want to go back to the 1970s economically.
That's right. I mean, Nigel spoke about the 1970s, the early 70s, 50 years ago, and the crisis is immediate. I have a huge respect for him. He was Chancellor, I think he left office 33 years ago, and I'm interested in what Sajid Javid said, who left office only 2 years ago, and said we can't have a high tax, high spend, low growth economy. That's the one risk right now. And when the IMF, and it didn't get much report, said last week that we were the lowest growing country of the G7, 0.5, people like me and Liz are saying, why are we raising taxes? Dominic talked about investment. How are we attracting investment by lifting corporation tax in 1 year from 19% to 25%? As business secretary, I speak to businesses all the time. And they're struck by the fact that we're raising taxes to a 70-year high. And not only are we stopping there, we're going to raise them more. This is not a way to grow the economy. No country in the world is saying the way to deal with a cost of living crisis is to put people's taxes up. Nobody's saying that. I speak to German ministers, French ministers. Nobody is doing this.
In fact, I mean, first of all, Nigel Lawson was very much the Thatcherite tax-cutting chancellor. And both of these candidates, in particular, I think, in fairness, Liz has been competing to be the heir to that mantra.
Okay.
Well, just a sec.
Yeah, sure.
And then on this issue of raising taxes, under Rishi's plan, corporation tax will remain the lowest in the G7. The difference is, if you cut corporation tax again under Liz's plan, it will benefit overwhelmingly, because Rishi has already said the smaller businesses will be exempt, the top tier, the very richest companies, and as we've seen recently with various different businesses, they won't invest in employees, in plant, in productivity. What they'll do is they'll give it to their shareholders in dividend. And actually what Rishi is saying, as he proved with the super deduction capital tax allowance, what we've got to have right now is businesses investing in their staff, in their technology, in Britain, rather than just paying it off to shareholders in that way. And I think that's the credible plan, which looks after the small businesses, the entrepreneurs, but also, of course, the consumers and those paying their mortgages, which is what the Conservatives are all about.
So I'm very struck by the fact that a Conservative cabinet minister is saying that shareholders shouldn't benefit. Of course, those shareholders are pension funds. So lots of the money will go back to pension fund holders, to people who invest in companies. And Liz's plan isn't to reduce corporation tax. She's saying we should keep the corporation tax at 19%, but not lift it by 6% in one fell swoop in April. And that was actually announced 2 years ago. So one thing I want to put to bed is this idea that high taxes is a route to curbing inflation. The tax plans, forgive me, I gave you time to say your piece.
Of unfunded tax cuts.
Please don't interrupt me.
Precisely.
Please don't interrupt.
The route
I know
to higher inflation.
I mean, Rishi did that stuff in the debate last time, but please give me time. To say that inflation is going to be dealt with by raising taxes is completely the wrong way of looking at it. The tax policy was set last year before the inflation really kicked in, and now they're using inflation to justify what I think is a failed tax policy. And I said that to Boris Johnson. We're not going to attract investment. We're not going to grow this economy by raising taxes.
OK. Can you tax your way out of growth?
No, but that's not what she's talking about. We've cut taxes on national insurance. There's others down the line. But the immediate problem, as the Governor of the Bank of England has highlighted today, in the here and now is inflation pushing up interest rates. And there's no previous chancellor, at least not one that's competing for a job in this race, who has said that it is remotely credible to have £60 billion worth of unfunded tax cuts, which will only have the impact, the risk of creating inflation higher for longer. It's forecast to go up to 13%, with that impact on people's mortgage interest rates. And this is something that Liz's own economist, Patrick Minford, has said not only is that inevitable, it's a good thing. I don't think it's good for consumers. I don't think it's good for the people
raising
paying
interest
those.
rates. Sorry, I just want to clarify.
Look, I think if you're facing the pressures on the cost of living now, if we see interest rates and mortgages go up to somewhere between 5 and 7%, which is what he said, that is, you're talking about a £400 tax cut, which then adds £7,000 on someone's mortgage payments. That cannot be the right way to deal with the crisis we face.
He didn't actually answer your question, which was, can you tax your way to growth? And of course you can't. No sensible person around the world thinks that the way to help people in the cost of a living crisis is to put up their taxes. This doesn't make any sense.
You're being quite polite to each other, admittedly,
I hope so.
talking over each other. But it does perhaps show a little bit the divisions that are obviously within the Conservative Party at the moment over this race. Where's unity at the end of this race? If your candidate wins, Liz Truss wins, how is she going to reunite the party?
I think we'll stitch the party up very quickly. And I think the main challenge is Keir Starmer's Labour Party. And I think we've had these leadership contests in the past. And as Dom says, he and I are friends. We've written books together. We've combined in government. We've worked hard together. And I'm sure we'll do so again.
Why do you think, Dominic Raab, that people are perhaps, if we look at the polls, certainly, not seeming to back Rishi Sunak in the same numbers that they seem to be backing Liz Truss? You know, he's a dyed-in-the-wool Brexiteer. You'd think that nearly all the Conservatives, especially to the right of the party, would want to back him. Is it because of what Kwasi Kwarteng was talking about? Is it about the fact that he isn't going to put up as an effective an opposition to Labour and the Lib Dems as perhaps Liz Truss is, that he's too technocratic a politician?
I think it's the reverse of that. Look, there have been some polls of the membership of the Conservative Party. They're very difficult to do. Techne has got one set of assumptions, YouGov another, and... But
they both say 32, 34%.
Well, no, actually,
ahead in points.
Techne was closer.
Techne was about 5 points in it.
But the Conservative Home and YouGov ones both give her 32 to 34%.
I agree. So they're very volatile, fluid. I'm not sure anyone really knows. I believe this race is much, much closer. And you talked about the public at large. I think whether it's the JL polling or much of the other polling, actually the country at large, and you talk about unity and Kwasi quite rightly talked about beating the Labour Party and Keir Starmer in 2 years' time. I think overwhelmingly it's clear, the evidence is there, that Rishi is best placed, whether it's in Leave or Remain seats, whether it's in Blue Wall seats like ours or Red Wall seats, to win. And the Conservative Party is nothing if it's not an election-winning machine.
I completely agree with Dom, but I think the more people see of Liz, the more they like her. In fact, she's beating Rishi in a lot of the polls that Dom is referring to. But I, like him, are sceptical about polls. I mean, I think it's a very close race. I think we're fighting for every vote. We're not absolutely not taking anything for granted. And I think it's very competitive. So I think she's ahead. I think she deserves to be ahead. But I think it's a keenly fought race.
OK, lots more questions for you a little bit later on this hour. But thank you both so much for giving us your thoughts. So that is what both candidates' teams hope to hear tonight, and what they think their candidates can do in this special programme tonight, what they hope that their candidates can get across to the viewers. But what about three of our correspondents, three of our specialist correspondents, about particular issues that they care about, that they are very well informed about and they're listening out for? We've got Ashish Joshi on the NHS and social care, we've got Helen Ann Smith on business and the economy, and we have Thomas Moore on climate change. Helen Ann, to you first of all, obviously a massive day in terms of business and the economy. They both offer very different solutions to the problems that beset us. Has everything changed, do you think, in this leadership race after today?
Yeah, you know, I really think it has. I think the timing of this programme tonight could not be more stark. A sense that the Bank of England today coming out with really, truly dire warnings about the scale of the economic challenge that this country faces going through the winter and well into next year as well. A sense I think they laid out very starkly the sheer scale of the challenge that whoever wins this contest will face. I mean, we are talking about a recession that's going to last over a year, inflation peaking over 13%. We're talking about a 5% drop in real-term living standards, energy bills that are going to be 3 times what they were last winter. And I think whoever wins this race, and in the programme tonight, both candidates are going to need to show that they take this very seriously, that they have empathy for the families who are, frankly, many of them going to face pretty catastrophic times this winter, and that they have a very competent economic plan to deal with it. And there has been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about tax cuts in this race so far. We heard the MPs debating it just there. And of course, I'm sure some of that will be argued again, whether tax cuts are the right thing to do, whether they cause more inflation now, later, and so on and so forth. But I actually wouldn't be surprised if what we've heard today changes the tone a little bit, because there are economists, there are consumer champions, and politicians as well, actually, who say that neither candidate at the moment have said quite enough to say how they are going to support families through an incredibly difficult winter that is coming. So I think potentially more on energy bills, that's a big one, I think that they'll need to really grapple with. And in a sense, they have a dynamic, ambitious plan on that.
And in terms of business, neither candidate, it isn't the sense that business, by and large, backs either candidate. They both see good and bad in both.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there have been warnings from the CBI about unfunded tax cuts. That's something that they're worried about. That, what business want is consumers with confidence and consumers with cash that they can spend. And if the cost of living crisis means that people at home are struggling to go out and spend their money in the economy, that is disastrous for business. And of course, they face, national insurance rises and interest rates affects them, and all those other things that we are all facing across the economy, are important to business as well. But a very, very interesting race indeed in business terms.
And Thomas Moore, our climate correspondent, climate change is obviously a big concern for many, many people. It's a big concern here at Sky, something we're very switched on to. Again, tonight, is there anything that in particular you've got your eye and your ear out for either of these candidates to say that you think is going to be significant?
Well, I mean, it's been a scorching summer, hasn't it? And climate change has been driving up those temperatures, that's clear. And it should be one of the most pressing problems that the Prime Minister has to address. And so far, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss haven't really shown that they've got a grasp of the scale and the urgency of what's required. They haven't outlined their plans that will take us towards net zero, but also give the UK the kind of resilience that we can withstand the shocks of climate change in the future. We need to see those plans to have confidence that we are going to go in the right direction.
It'll be interesting to see whether it's as big a thing for Conservative voters and those who are here tonight, whether there are many questions from the audience on that subject.
Well, the evidence suggests that they are very niche electorate, that they don't, that they are far more climate sceptic than the wider public. So I think that's probably going to be one of the issues that they, of course, this is a debate that's really being looked at by a very small group of people who may not represent the wider thinking, the urgency that is required to deal with what we're all being surrounded by.
Thomas, thanks very much. Ashish Joshi, down at the end there on health. We've had NHS leaders talking about a winter crisis already today, despite the hot temperatures outside. It's on the horizon. Again, what are you listening out for tonight?
I'm listening out for something very bold, because it's very easy for either candidate to stand there and say, we're going to make tens of millions of pounds available, we're going to have thousands of doctors, we're going to build X number of new hospitals. They have to have a real understanding of the crisis that has gripped the NHS and social care. I would like to see some real thought going into the answers about workforce issues. That's the number one crisis facing the NHS right now. Social care is in such a precarious state right now, as well as putting food on your plates and heating your homes. You're going to worry if you go into hospital, if you have an elderly relative who needs social care provision. All of these are pressing issues. Up until now, I haven't heard either candidate really address these. Not the big, bold headlines, but a real understanding of the issues driving the emergency in the NHS. That's what I want to hear tonight.
And one of our audience members that we spoke to earlier, she's come from a care background, and that was what she's here tonight. And she said a similar thing, that she doesn't really feel she's heard enough from either candidate on that yet. We have had a few statements on the NHS, haven't we? Liz Truss has been talking about cutting waiting times. Do you feel Rishi Sunak has more to do in terms of addressing questions about the NHS?
Yes, he does. I think what's going to be interesting is every politician you speak to and you talk to them about the NHS, the first thing they'll say is, we want to cut waiting times. How are you going to cut waiting times? That's got to come back down to staffing. And nobody has really addressed this workforce issue, which stands in the way of the NHS moving forward at the moment. So that's key tonight. I don't want to hear them say we're going to give X amount of money, magic money trees, we're going to shake this magic money tree, magic up these hospitals. That's not going to happen. What will be interesting to see is if either candidate has a real understanding of what's actually going on in the NHS and in social care right now.
And again, interesting to see whether there will be many questions from the audience on the NHS, but I'm sure there'll be lots on the economy as well, and we shall see about climate change. Thank you all very much. Well, stay with us. The candidates have arrived here at Sky Centre. They're going to be busy making their last-minute preparations. Maybe they might be a little bit nervous about getting into that auditorium and taking those questions from the audience and from Kay Burley. After the break, we'll get an insight into how some people prepare for this kind of set-piece event. Stay with us. Welcome back to Sky Studios. We are now less than half an hour away from our special programme, The Battle for Number 10, with the two contenders to be the next Prime Minister, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, facing questions from our studio audience of Tory party members. And they're also going to be interviewed by Sky presenter Kay Burley. She's going to make sure those audience questions are actually answered. Well, the two candidates will have been preparing for days, and even now we'll be doing some frenetic last-minute briefing with their aides. Let's talk to someone who has played that role, Nick Pisani. He helped prepare David Cameron for a leader debate back in 2010 and also Jeremy Hunt in 2019. Nick, lovely to see you. Thanks for coming in here.
Pleasure.
So this last half an hour, I imagine nerves will be getting a little frayed. What's going to be going on behind the scenes in both of these camps?
I think there are going to be very different things going on behind the scenes of each camp, but you're right, there's absolute sense of tension around. You can feel the atmosphere. The candidate tries to exude calmness, but inside it's chaos and fear. And they do their best to conceal it, but until they really get going on the show, their nerves drive it. So I think Liz Truss's team are going to be saying, whatever you do, don't screw up. You can't lose this if you just don't say the wrong thing. Stay calm. Stick to the script. Don't try and add anything that may be risky. Deal with the difficult questions up front, like the tax question, the mess of a few days ago. Get it out of the way. She would have lost her confidence a little. She was very confident in the big BBC debate, but I think it may have been affected by the last few days. And that'll be something that the audience will sense, and probably Kay as well.
And that is quite a... It's quite a big thing to have that responsibility of having the, you know, I'm the leading candidate. If I mess it up, it's all down to me on your shoulders, isn't it? Just before I ask the next question, the candidates have tossed a coin to see who is going to go first.
OK.
I think we can bring you the footage of that, and Liz Truss won. So she is going to be going first. She's going to be taking those audience questions and then being questioned by Kay. Is that a benefit, do you think, going first? Or is it...
Well, it might be to her, but I think it's to Rishi's benefit that he's going second because, I mean, this is his last big shot at the electorate. And the electorate's 160,000, but it's the waverers, the undecideds that he's going to be aiming for. And we've seen smooth Rishi, well-polished, articulate, informed, on top of his brief Rishi. That was the very first debate he did. And then we saw the quite shouty, mansplaining, interrupting Rishi. And he's got to get it absolutely right, because this is his last chance. If I were him, I would listen to my advisors, but at some point I probably would go with my instincts, because he has got a lot to lose. She's way out of the front. So she needs to mess up big time, and he needs to pull a rabbit out of the hat. And that's what he's got to try and judge while it's going along.
We've got the footage, actually, of the coin toss. Let's just show it to you.
So what we're going to do is use a coin to decide who goes first or second. Are you happy with that, both? So whoever chooses, then they decide whether they go first or second. Ladies first, heads or tails?
I'll go for tails.
Okay. Never fails is what they say. Let's see. Tails never fails. Do you want to go first or second?
I want to go first, please.
There we go. Liz Truss is first. You'll join us in about 45 minutes' time.
I look forward to it.
Thank
See you all then.
That coin toss just taken place. Do politicians take advice? I mean, there's obviously people with massive egos, people who've done incredibly well to get where they are, and clearly have got a great deal about them already, haven't they? They're good at talking, they're articulate. How do they take to somebody like yourself coming along and telling them to do it all differently?
It all depends when you're telling them. If you're telling them right now, 25 minutes or 20 minutes before they're going on for their biggest performance, they're probably not listening to you or to anyone else. They're a bag of nerves, and they really ought to go for a walk, is what I used to say. You know, go for a walk, clear your head, try and calm down, try and get yourself back on the level. I remember the first debate I did in 2005. It was David Davis and David Cameron. And actually, Cameron was not that good. He stood away from the lectern and looked a little bit like a spivvy media type, which many portrayed him as, whereas David Davis, who'd had a disastrous conference speech, which allowed Cameron to come from behind. He grabbed the lectern. In fact, he nearly almost broke it. And he was very authoritative and got a 70-30 majority of the instant poll afterwards. But, of course, Cameron went on to win the overall contest as leader.
But also doing well in one of these scenarios doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do well overall, doesn't it? I mean, I suppose if you think back to when the coalition happened and the Big Sky debate, you know, I agree with Nick, with what everybody said. He sort of came from nowhere and became this figure, and that became the slogan from the night. And thinking of other debates we've had and other questioning we've had, you know, let's not listen to experts was another phrase that came out of it. So you can't always control, can you, the phrase that's going to be the one that people remember from these kind of events?
No, absolutely. Actually, David Cameron really was up against it. This was the first leaders' debate, you might remember, in 2010. And Brown had agreed to do it because he had no choice. And then, of course, Nick came from nowhere, looking straight down the barrel of the camera, a new technique not used before. And Cameron didn't win that first debate, and he needed to, because everybody thought his presentation skills would help get him across the line. And actually, with the second debate, which I did help prepare him for, he was much more confident, but he only just won by a couple of percentage points. Again, it was all about Nick, who's coming back from San Francisco. I wonder if he'll be back in time for tonight.
This is an occasion where it's very hard to avoid a question, isn't it?
It's very hard to avoid the question because it will keep coming back at you and it will become very awkward and very embarrassing. That's why I think in Liz Truss's case, she needs to deal with this tax mess of a couple of days ago up front. She's pretty vulnerable on that front. The economic figures today, the report from the Bank of England today, they're not really playing towards her solution or economic solution that she is proposing. So I think for Rishi, by the way, I think he's also got to take into account, you know, Nadine Norris has been commenting on his expensive outfits and the cheap earrings that Liz is wearing, and it'll be interesting to see what he's wearing, because I think body language and general likability will be a very important part of it tonight as well.
Fascinating. Well, we should all be watching for all of those things now. We now have experts' eyes. We'll be watching them. Nick, thank you very much for giving us an idea as to what is going on and how nervous the candidates may well be at the moment, just a few minutes before. Well, of course, those who will decide the next Conservative leader are those within the Conservative Party itself, the members. And we are with Tory supporters across the country. Greg Milam is in Crewe. Liz Bates is in Weybridge in Surrey. But first, let's go to Mari Aurora, who is in Worcester for us. And Mari, of course, famously, Worcester woman was long seen as a key voter. Any idea which of the candidates Worcester woman may be voting for after this evening?
Well, it absolutely is. We've got a whole room packed here of Tory members, some supporting Rishi, some supporting Liz Truss. Now, interestingly, we're with all these Tory members at the rowing club. However, about half of the room are undecided. If we start here with Rishi Sunak supporters, if you just tell me why you want Rishi to be the next Prime Minister.
I had been reading about his policy, and I am a fan of his policy and how he dealt with the pandemic, with the furlough scheme and everything, and his economic plan going forward, how you would plan to take the country out of the pandemic. And he will make the history if he becomes the Prime Minister, being the first Asian Prime Minister.
OK, and what about you? Why are you supporting Rishi Sunak?
I think his campaign and his career before that has given us a sense of a guy who is really motivated to deliver sound economics. You know, we as a party should be the party of sound money, and Rishi Sunak, for me, will deliver that.
OK, now we're going to run over to Team Truss over here. Now, you're slightly undecided, but you're leaning toward Truss. Tell me why.
It was one of her comments that she said about online bullying. She said that she was going to captivate it and sort of move forward with it, whereas Richie was undecided. But like I said before, it's still early on. There's 5 weeks left, so maybe Richie can flip the coin.
OK, Adele, why are you wanting Liz Truss?
I feel that she's the more radical of the two. I feel that she would be tougher on any unresolved issues that we have with Europe, the Northern Ireland Protocol, etc. And I think looking forward to the general election, that she might have greater appeal with trying to retain those red wall seats.
OK, and obviously the red wall not very far away from here in Worcester. No. Finally, Mark, why are you Team Truss?
I think she's the more positive of the two candidates.
we need things done right away, the promises they made during the election, whereas I think the other side, he's going to prolong things. We've got to take advantage of all the things that have come out of Brexit, the independence we have now, things this country could do. We could be very successful, even though that we're going towards a recession. You know, we need positive people in power right now to do good things for the country.
So as you can see, quite a split room here, and all the other members behind me are still undecided, so it's still very much all to play for. That Sky debate going on very, very soon is going to be so crucial to those candidates to win over councillors and members like the people in this room in Worcester.
Mari, thanks very much. Let's go to Greg Milam. He's in Crewe, and Greg, Crewe, an interesting seat, a marginal constituency, slightly poorer than the UK average. You've got areas which are really prosperous against areas which are not so. What is the feeling there about what's happening this evening, and who might be the candidate that gives the best for that area?
Yeah, well, this is part of that red wall, isn't it, where the Conservatives did so well in 2019, and now it's up to someone else after Boris Johnson to deliver on those promises. But there are plenty of undecideds, and we have 4 of them, undecided Conservative voting members. Hanan Sarwar, let's talk to you first of all. What is it you want to see tonight that will help you make up your mind?
I want to see both candidates talking about the economy, levelling up and education. We need a Prime Minister now who can deliver our manifesto pledges and actually unite the country and take the Conservative Party in a position where we can win the next election and actually prove to people that we are in touch with them and we will tackle the cost of living crisis.
Liz Truss seems to be leading in all of the polls. Which way are you leaning on this? So before what happens tonight?
So I am undecided, but I'm leaning more towards Liz Truss, and that's purely because she's actually going to tackle the cost of living crisis. She's going to tackle the fuel crisis, and she's also said that she will not increase taxes and she'll reverse the national insurance hike as well. So she seems more in touch with people up north.
Greg Ellis, a member of the Young Conservatives, you've said it's all about who can win an election come the next general election. What are you looking for tonight to help you make up your mind on that?
I'm looking for someone who can engage with young voters. I mean, there's a real entrepreneurial, ambitious spirit amongst young people in this country. I feel like at the moment I'm edging towards Liz. She seems like the best person to achieve that goal by handing people a stake in society, young people a stake in society, you know, and handing them the tools to actually achieve something.
Deborah Sweetman, you're the chair of the Conservatives in Tatton. We're in the north, all of that talk about the red wall and what the Conservatives promised and what won them so many gains in the north and the Midlands in 2019. How important is that now, what the north needs from whoever is the next Conservative leader, the next Prime Minister?
Yeah, the north needs somebody, I don't want to sort of refer back to Boris, but obviously we won a lot of the red wall on a manifesto that Boris put forward, and I think we need to stick to an awful lot of that manifesto. I think we need somebody that's going to encourage industry and manufacturing and help with businesses in the north, which has been severely lacking. We've talked about levelling up, but it's not really happened.
And Kate Parkinson, a councillor in this part of the world. Again, what is it you want to see for the north in particular from what the candidates have to say tonight?
So it's important for me certain policies are addressed, especially health and social care. We need more money for the NHS. We need that put back into the industry. We need better infrastructure in transport. So I want to see our existing transport really strengthened. I know HS2 is a big one for Rishi Sunak, but Liz actually said that she's in support of HS3. Now, I can't support HS2 because it's cutting through my ward of Highley. I can't do that. I'm really sorry. I think it's a major money pit, so I want to see these issues addressed. I also want to see education addressed as well. They've put forward some really good policies, both of them. They've spoken about what they want to do. I know Rishi wants to have multi-academy trusts, but then we've got to look at academies. A lot of them are failing, where Liz wants to look at these and then she wants to restructure them. She wants to take away that money. She wants to put new schools in and new grammar schools in. So I'm looking for quite a lot from them tonight.
Okay, a lot to cover. Thank you very much. We'll see what happens and how decisive tonight is. But for now, from Crewe, back to you, Jayne.
Greg Milam there for us in Crewe. Thanks very much. Well, let's cross to Liz Bates. She is in Weybridge in Surrey. And Liz, you know, you're in Surrey. It is a relatively safe Conservative area. Who there do they think is the one that is going to take the Conservative message to the rest of the country?
Well, it's interesting. Yes, you said, as you said, I'm here in Surrey. This is kind of traditional Tory territory, if you like, and a lot of people here leaning more towards Rishi Sunak. Let's just speak to some of the Conservative members that we've gathered here with us today. They're very excited about the programme that's coming up. First of all, Susie and Josh. Susie, you've already voted for Rishi Sunak. Josh, as well, you were leaning at the beginning towards Rishi Sunak. You've been quite impressed by Liz Truss during this campaign, so I will ask both of you, can Rishi Sunak, he's lagging behind in the polls, what can he do to catch up?
I think Rishi needs to offer a clear, concise vision about where he wants to take the country, not just for the next 2 years, but for the next 10 years, and really present a vision that we can all get behind.
Okay. And Susie, what do you think? Can he pull this back?
I think so. Rishi's actually telling us what we need to hear. It's tough at the moment. We all know that with the impacts from COVID and the Ukraine crisis. And platitudes and telling us what we want to hear. I think most of our members are much more intelligent than that and realise that Rishi's got the plan to actually get us through it.
So you're suggesting Liz Truss is the one that's telling people what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. Is Rishi the grown-up?
He has a lot of competency. I mean, we're very lucky that both of them are very, very good ministers. But for me, Rishi has that extra to take that step up to being the leader and the Prime Minister we need.
Great, thank you, Susie. Let's go over here to Steph. So, Steph, we're here in Surrey. What is it that people in Surrey will want to hear from tonight's programme from these two leadership candidates?
I think it will be around the economy and putting the economy back on a steady footing, coping with inflation, things about interest rates, the cost of living. I think that's going to be very important.
So economic competence, absolutely central.
Absolutely.
OK, and Chris, you were saying to me earlier, we just heard someone in Crewe talking about levelling up. Do people in Surrey care at all about levelling up, or does it actually annoy them?
I think a lot of people find the levelling up agenda quite annoying, but actually, I think it's massively important for Surrey. One of the key problems that we have is overdevelopment in the area. If we can get more people around the country enjoying economic success, there's less pressure on the south.
Perfect. And Harrison, you were also, like many of your friends here, leaning towards Rishi Sunak. Is there anything that Liz Truss can say tonight that could change your mind?
Well, I think you should always remain open-minded, but for me, the key thing is Rishi Sunak's competence and the progression from the role. Rishi Sunak has been the Chancellor, and the most important thing at the moment is the economy and the cost of living and how to grow the economy. So for me, it makes most sense for someone to go from that Chancellor role into Prime Minister.
Thank you so much. Well, there you go. You've heard from Conservative members here in Surrey. They care about economic credibility and competence, and they will be watching the battle for number 10, listening to those answers very closely, and in the end, deciding who is going to be the next Prime Minister of this country.
Liz, thanks very much. And also listening very closely, the politicians who are representing the two candidates this evening. We have Dominic Raab, who is representing Rishi Sunak, and we have Kwasi Kwarteng, who's representing Liz Truss. Dominic Raab, to you first of all. I mean, clearly, whatever you will say, the majority of polls show Rishi Sunak not to be doing so well. Do you think there is even a possibility that he could stand aside over the next few weeks and step back from this race after tonight, after this final big media debate discussion?
No, absolutely not. I think the race is very close, and actually the response he's having as we enter what's called the ground operation, where people are touring, the two candidates are touring, the membership is very strong, and a sense of undecided voters falling his way, particularly now where the narrative he's been talking about, the risk of inflation, the risk to interest rates, has come into sharp relief given what the Governor of the Bank of England is saying. So actually, the longer this race goes on, the longer I think Rishi's economic plan is vindicated. And I think the more the membership have warmed to him and also seen his appeal to the country at large. Because this is partly, I think, about the economic plan, who's got a steady hand, who's not going to chop and change, who can actually think a policy through and then deliver it, and also who's got the appeal, the resonance, whether it's in blue wall, red wall, Leave, Remain seats. And I think Rishi is the man to deliver that plan and steer the economy through, but also to unite the party and reach out across the country, which is what we need to beat Keir Starmer.
So stability and unity coming from him. Kwasi Kwarteng, some people will look at what the Bank of England have announced today and say this isn't the time to be ripping up the economic orthodoxy that we have at the moment and changing everything, which is what Liz Truss seems to want to do. Do you think that it might put the fear in some Conservative voters?
I don't think so. I think it's very clear on the economy and tax Liz is winning the argument. It's a very simple proposition. You cannot tax your way to prosperity. Today, we have a 70-year tax high, 70 years. I think 1949 was the last time the taxes were so high. And the IMF is predicting the lowest growth of the G7. We're not going to be able to tax our way to prosperity. And as far as chopping and changing is concerned, it was Rishi Sunak who argued at the beginning of this year that a VAT reduction on energy prices, on energy bills, was wrong because it was targeted at rich people and wasn't targeted enough at poorer people, people on lower incomes. And then only 10 days ago, he said that this was a cornerstone of his new economic plan should he become Prime Minister. That was what people call a flip-flop. It was a U-turn, and it showed an unsteady hand and not a grown-up, which was his phrase, a grown-up approach to the economy. We cannot go to the people and say, the way to deal with your cost of living crisis is to put up your taxes. As I've said, no other business minister across the world is doing this. No other finance minister says to me, you know what we're going to do, Kwasi? We're going to increase taxes to help our people with cost of living. It doesn't make any sense.
So do you think that's a fair representation of Rishi Sunak? Is he the flip-flop candidate?
You'll be shocked to know that I don't agree. I look back previously, we had a much bigger support package to deal with cost of living and energy. But it's absolutely right to say, with what we now know about what's happening to the energy cap, that we take the measures we can to mitigate it. But look, if the crux of this debate is about getting inflation down, having sensible control of our money and our public finances, and then delivering responsible tax cuts that can't hurt, that can only help people, then I think Rishi is the one that steered the clearest line. A £400 tax cut that costs you £5,000, £7,000 on your mortgage interest payments, it's a pretty lousy deal, the kind of lousy deal that would lose us the election.
It's part of the issue for Rishi Sunak. Sorry, I'll come back in a moment.
Oh, thank you.
It's about excitement. And we were talking to Sam Coates earlier, and when you think of Conservative leaders in the past, and you think, obviously, following in Boris Johnson's footsteps, it's clear that the Conservative Party like exciting candidates. Is part of the problem that Rishi Sunak is perhaps just too straight?
Look, I think, actually, this issue of being straight, credible, honest, with some of the challenges that we've been through, the lack of trust in politics at the moment, and let's face it, some of those challenges for our party. I think people are looking for a candidate that has levelled with them about the problems and has got a credible plan to deal with them. And I think, actually, you know, there's, of course, some theatre to politics, and I think you do need to have charisma and be able to appeal to people. I think Rishi's got that in droves. We're seeing that on the ground when we go to association by association. But actually, having a candidate, in your words, that is straight, is honest with people, I think is absolutely the exam question in this leadership contest.
Okay,
so the status quo isn't working. We're in a bad place, and Liz is the only change candidate. Rishi was good enough to say, everything is okay, you've got to stick with my plan, I'm the grown-up. That was what he said. And then, of course, he reversed his position by saying, offering tax cuts. He offered a tax cut, I think that was drowned out by the Lionesses earlier this week. And now he's trying to readjust his position. Taxing our way to prosperity doesn't work, and Liz is completely committed to trying to create incentives in this economy.
Very briefly, Harry Cole has you down as the next Chancellor if Liz Truss wins. Would you take that role?
I'm not in any speculation about jobs.
Well, other people are speculating.
Well, the first thing she has to win, and that's what I'm focused on.
OK. Thank you both so much. Really good of you to come along tonight, and we'll be talking to you afterwards to find out how you feel your candidates went. Thank you both very much. Stay with us, and you're off now to watch the discussion and the questions. Just minutes away from that main event. We're going to go back outside here at Sky Centre. Lots to think about that we've talked about over the last hour. A lot of nerves for those candidates, potentially. Nick Pisani was saying how this is really the difficult time. He says maybe they should go out and have a walk. It's a beautiful evening. We've got the Sky campus. It would be gorgeous for them to come out and have a little walk, but I imagine that they're going to be squirreled away in a room with their advisors. Thinking about some of the issues, Sam Coates, our deputy political editor, is here, that have come up tonight: care, health, obviously the economy. We knew that was going to be a really big one. I mean, what for you are you looking forward to over the next hour and a half?
Well, look, I think the first thing I'm going to look for is just for some of the tensions that you saw there between Dominic Raab and Kwasi Kwarteng, the divisions in the Tory party. Are the fissures inside the Conservative Party now so great, will we see them on stage tonight, that it's going to be really hard for the next Prime Minister to govern because of the underlying tension in the Tory party? So that's one thing I'm looking for. But tonight, really, Jane, is about those two figures, one of whom will be in number 10 in just over a month. The challenge for Rishi Sunak, look, he's the pandemic chancellor. He's offering sensible stability. But is he a leader? Can he inspire and excite? Can he grab the attention of his party and take the country along with him? That, I think, is what we're going to be testing tonight. Then there's Liz Truss. She has pole vaulted into first place in this race, brought there by the Tory right, and she's the darling of the Brexiteers. Can she say no to what they want ever? Is there any evidence of that? And when backed into a corner, is she candid or something else? Politics, I think, is a battle of ideas, it's often said, but it's also a slugfest over language. I think tonight what matters is who paints the better picture for Britain in the 2020s. That's what viewers at home and voters in this contest will be looking for.
Is there anything that you think that they could get unstuck over? Is there anything that they're going to want to avoid talking about tonight?
I think almost anything could prove a challenge for these two. Although both have been around in politics either at senior rank or just as an MP for some years, this is the biggest job at a point of domestic and global turmoil. It's not going to be easy for anybody. It's not going to be easy for whoever succeeds Boris Johnson. There is no subject that is safe tonight, I think, in Kay Burley's hands.
And we've got the coin toss. Liz Truss is going first. Do you think that was her choice, you know? She won the coin toss. She could choose whether she went first. She obviously thinks that's an advantage, but Nick Pizzani was saying that, you know, it's also an advantage for Rishi Sunak because then he can sort of listen to hear the kind of themes and questions that are coming.
One of the challenges for both candidates is proving that they can think on their feet. And that'll be true for Liz Truss going first, but it'll be true for Rishi Sunak, who hasn't had to deal with a huge, great breadth of issues, lots of portfolios in the way that Liz Truss has. So in its own way, it's difficult for each of them. Both have got to show themselves nimble as communicators and trusted for the public.
Well, communication is what it's all about, isn't it, Sam? Thanks so much, Sam Coates there. Now, we're going to be talking to Sam again, and we're going to be talking to both Dominic Raab and to Kwasi Kwarteng after the programme to see what they thought, and we're also going to be talking to some of those audience members who are in there as well. But the time for talking, for me at least, is over for now. Coming up in the next few minutes, we have the battle for number 10. Kay Burley and our studio audience are going to be putting these two candidates through the test. Who could be Prime Minister after the next hour and a half? Stay with us, because after the special programme, we're going to be rejoining you at 9:30 and getting full reaction and analysis of what both of these candidates have to say. Stay with Sky News. Welcome to Sky Studios in West London. Tonight, the final two candidates hoping to be the next Prime Minister will face questions from Conservative Party members and from me. I'm Kay Burley. This is Liz Truss, of course, and Rishi Sunak as well. Good evening to you both. For the next 90 minutes, they'll be answering questions from some of the people who will decide their future. This is the battle for number 10. Good evening and welcome to the battle for number 10. The struggle for voters between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak comes to a head tonight here at Sky News. For weeks, the candidates for Conservative leader have debated, but only now are the people who'll pick them finally getting the delayed chance to vote. The backdrop, a country predicted to be about to plunge into recession. It really is make or break. Tonight, we have more than 60 Conservative members and others in our audience, largely reflecting the demographic makeup of the party. Many of them are still undecided over who to back. In a format that's different and we hope perhaps more illuminating than other events, the two candidates will separately face questions from the audience and then face mine in an extended, in-depth interview. We tossed a coin before we came on air. Who won? Liz Truss won, and she chose to go first. She is with us now. Are you happy with it? Good evening. It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you. Are you happy with the format?
I'm very happy with the format.
Ready for the first question?
Yes, excited.
Here we go. Let's start with our first question, and that is Diana, who's here on the front row. Good evening, Diana. What's your question for Liz Truss?
My question for Liz is, the Bank of England have said that a recession is inevitable. What could you do to mitigate the impact of this?
Well, what the Bank of England have said today is, of course, extremely worrying. But it is not inevitable. We can change the outcome and we can make it more likely that the economy grows. And what's important is, first of all, that we need to help people struggling with the cost of living. I would immediately reverse the national insurance increase. I would also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on fuel bills. But I'd also keep corporation tax low to make sure that we are attracting investment into our economy and doing all we can to avoid a recession, because I know what it's like when people lose their jobs, when towns and cities across our country struggle. I don't want our country to go through that. That's why it's so important we keep taxes low and we do all we can to grow the economy by taking advantage of our post-Brexit freedom, unleashing investment, changing things like the procurement rules and doing things differently. But now is the time to be bold, because if we don't act now, we are headed for very, very difficult times.
Are you happy with that?
I am. That's good to hear. Thank you.
OK, anybody else got a follow-up on that one for us? Nobody at this stage. We're just warming you up still, aren't we? OK, well, I've got one. You're confident that you'll be able to avert a recession by the end of the year?
Well, what we know at the moment is a recession is predicted by the Bank of England. And what we need to make sure is we're using all the tools at our disposal, keeping taxes low, doing the reforms we need to our economy to get growth going faster, to encourage people to set up businesses, to encourage businesses to invest. And I want us to be on the side of people who work hard, people who do the right thing, people who support their families, people who set up businesses. And that's why it's so important we don't burden them with excess regulation, but that we also keep taxes low. Under the current proposals, our corporation tax would go up to the same level as France and 10 points ahead of Ireland. And I really worry about our capacity to attract that investment into our economy if we do that. No. You simply can't tax your way to growth. And I'm afraid the very high taxes we have at the moment, a 70-year high, are likely to lead to a recession. OK. And that's what the Bank of England is predicting.
OK, Neha is here. Neha, good evening to you. What's your question for Ms Truss?
Hi, Liz. My question is, I'm amongst very few in my age group and ethnicity that are actually members of the Conservative Party. I've been speaking to some of us, and we are afraid that the party has lost credibility. So my question is, how will you repair the damage to the party's reputation?
Well, the most important thing is we deliver on the promises we made. We got elected across the country in 2019. Because of our manifesto, we said we'd unleash opportunity, that we would grow the economy, that we would keep taxes low. So we need to deliver on all of those things. We need to deliver on the opportunities of Brexit. And when we promise something, we need to follow through on it. I think that's really important. But I also want the Conservative Party to be a party that reaches out to everybody across the country, gets new people on board, encourages people to join our party, because we've got some fantastically talented MPs, but we need a new generation of members. And I would appoint a really strong party chairman to encourage that to happen.
Any clues?
I have not. I am definitely, Kay, not being premature. We're still in the middle of a leadership race, and what I'm about is about talking to our party members about my policies for government. But what I can say is I would always make sure I appointed people to my cabinet on the basis of merit and people that get things done, because what people really want us to do is deliver. And we've only got 2 years. It's not a long amount of time, and we need to get started straight away. So I want people from all parts of the party, from all parts of the country, who can really get on and deliver.
OK, politicians always say that our party is a broad church, and I always point out to them that people die in Broadchurch. I know. Let's bring it... I know.
That Kay is worse than the earlier pun. That is worse than the earlier pun.
We'll keep that between ourselves. Nashava has got a question for us.
Hi.
Just here. Hi.
Good evening, Liz. I'm a medical consultant. I work in a hospital, and I see day in, day out the relentless pressure that our medical staff is having. Now, understaffing is a real issue at this moment in time. If you become the next Prime Minister, how will you solve this?
Well, first of all, the NHS has done a fantastic job in COVID, but we are facing a huge backlog, and that is putting huge pressure on. First of all, I'd make sure we're putting the recent funding we allocated, the 13 billion, into social care, because there are many people who are in hospital who ought to be in social care, but there aren't the beds available. So I'd first of all make sure we're investing the money in social care. I'd also support our doctors and nurses more by removing some of the central diktats and also having fewer layers of management. On the campaign trail over the last few weeks, I've met people who face 7 or 8 layers of management above them, and I think that can be quite difficult and quite demotivating. And what we need is more of the empowerment, more of the decisions to be made by people on the front line. There are also a number of other issues we need to look at, like doctors' pensions. I've met a lot of doctors who've gone into retirement because of the specific issues around their pensions. I need to sort that out. And also, there are many doctors who very kindly came out of retirement to help during COVID. You know, help with the vaccination programme, help with the real issues we face in our hospitals. And what I'd like to do is see what we can do to encourage those people to come back into the profession and really help, because we do face serious issues. It is difficult to get a GP appointment. I represent a rural area. We've got real problems with ambulance waiting times as well. So we need all hands on deck, but I really believe that it's by trusting people on the front line, trusting the professionals more, and making the organisation a really great place to work, that we will actually solve these problems together.
Want to come back on that?
I will say that I know that people that I work with will be really, really happy if you looked into pension tax, because a lot of people are going into early retirement.
Exactly.
So I'm sure that will help bring the waiting lists down and, you know, help the road for recovery as well. So thank you.
Thank you. But we also need to listen to people like you who are actually involved in the health service and listen to your advice. Because what I've heard is lots of areas where we could use our facilities better. So, for example, I met a doctor who told me that he wanted to go in and work at the weekend, use the equipment of the weekend, but actually he'd been banned from more senior people in the organisation from doing that. So there are things like that I think we can empower people to do things differently and really treat this as a major national programme to deal with the aftermath of COVID. Okay. We were very successful at dealing with COVID, getting the vaccine, rolling out the vaccine, but now we have a major issue with the National Health Service, and we need all of the best brains working on it.
Just to clarify, are you suggesting that you should sack layers of management?
No, I'm not. What I'm suggesting is that we need to deploy people in the National Health Service better. And what I have heard is that there's been a lot of targets set centrally by the Department of Health and NHS England, and I want things to be decided more locally, so there's less distance between the people making the decisions and the people actually on front line helping the patients.
Lots of people want to ask you questions, Ms Truss. I think David from Guildford. David, where are you? Hand up, David. Where is he? There he is. He's just here. David, you've got a question on Ukraine, I believe.
I have. I thought it was going to Rishi, I must admit.
Oh, well.
But I'm perfectly
there
happy.
We are.
How would you propose to broker peace negotiations in Ukraine as opposed to continuing to provide arms to prolong the state of war?
Well, the only way this war will end is when the Russians leave Ukraine. And we need to make sure that we enable the Ukrainians to defeat Vladimir Putin. If there's any failed peace settlement, if there's any giveaway of Ukrainian territory, what we know from history is Russia will just come back for more. We saw that with the Minsk Accords, which didn't work. And we know what Vladimir Putin's plans are. He said that he wants to create a greater Russia, essentially the old Soviet Union, including the likes of the Baltic states. So that is why it's so important that we were the first European country to supply weapons to Ukraine. And we need to continue to do that. But we also need to work with our allies like the Americans, who are also putting weapons into Ukraine. We also need to toughen up the sanctions on Russia, because at the moment, the way Putin is able to fund his appalling war machine is because of the oil and gas revenues that he's getting. And so that means us finding alternative sources, particularly in the UK. We have the North Sea, we can invest in more nuclear, but it also involves other countries finding alternative sources as well. Because what Putin has done is he's used Europe's dependence on Russian gas to hold the whole continent to ransom. And that is appalling. And we know the end result of what happens when dictators get appeased.
Is that every inch of territory that's been taken since 2014?
Well, I certainly think it would be wrong for us to give away any territory on behalf of the Ukrainians. Now, of course, President Zelensky, ultimately is the person who has to determine what an eventual peace deal would look like. And he has been very clear that Russia needs to leave the entirety of the Ukrainian territory. But I think it would be completely wrong for the United Kingdom, or indeed any other country, to say Ukraine should give up part of their territory. That would be very wrong. And what I worry is the lesson it would give to aggressors around the world if Russia was seen by saber-rattling, by lining up troops on the border, lining up tanks on the border, then successfully gaining a piece of Ukrainian territory.
Sure.
What message would that send to others around the world? It would be a terrible message, and the long-term threat to global security would be appalling.
David?
No, I just wondered if you didn't mention anything about attempting to negotiate or broker some peace deal.
We have been involved in working on negotiations with our American, French and German colleagues, and we are providing support to the Ukrainians to do just that. But it is ultimately about what the Ukrainians are willing to negotiate. What I don't want to see is Ukraine be put under any pressure to give up territory for expediency's sake, because I'm saying it simply won't be expedient, because all we'll see is Russia retreat and then come back for more later. And they still haven't given up their ambitions to take the whole of Ukraine. It was a tactical retreat away from Kiev, not a long-term retreat. And we need to be very, very worried about Putin's intentions. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that I favour raising our defence spending to 3% of GDP over the next decade.
Still got lots of questions to get through.
Sorry.
So if I may, no, not at all. I want to bring in our next question, which is about housing, and it's from Jude from Chippenham, and I've wanted to say this all evening. Hey, Jude.
Hey, Kay, thank you very much. Hello, Foreign Secretary. I've recently graduated and will be moving to London to start a new job as a commercial lawyer. When I made the decision, I thought, perhaps naively, that it would make sense to buy somewhere in London rather than rent. But that was before I saw the cost of a deposit on a starter home. How will you solve the housing crisis and make it easier for young people to own their own home?
Jude, I think it's incredibly important that we help more people get on the housing ladder. It is a problem that this generation of young people end up buying houses much later in their lives than previous generations. But the way to do it is not the system we have at the moment, which is Soviet-style top-down housing targets, which simply cause huge concern and don't actually deliver the results we want. And before I became an MP, I was a councillor. I sat on a planning committee. It was hours of my life I'll never get back because we didn't have any control over what happened. Everything got overruled by the planning inspectorate in Bristol. So what I want is a much more localised system of planning. So in London, for example, I think there's more opportunity to build up in London, to build more higher storey buildings. I think in other parts of the country, what we need is more investment zones where we have industry developed alongside homes, alongside infrastructure, and that can be determined by local people. But the one-size-fits-all planning system we have at the moment simply doesn't work. The other thing I do to help you specifically is when somebody does rent, they should be able to use their rental history towards getting a mortgage for their home. And that will help people who are long-term renters get onto the housing ladder.
OK, just want to share this quote with you that you, I think it was 3 years ago, perhaps a little bit longer. We need to build 1 million homes on the London Green Belt, near railway stations and around other growing cities, specifically to allow the under 40s to be able to own their own homes. Do you still want to build 1 million homes on Green Belt and the like?
So what I don't want to do, Kay, is build it on the Green Belt. Because I do think, well, I've changed my view on that. I'm still very keen for the under 40s to be able to own their own homes. But what I've seen is that the way these top-down targets have resulted in having the opposite effect of getting the homes built. And I'm now of the view that what we need to do is have incentives to get local councils to set up investment zones and do things differently, because the current system isn't working.
OK, so you've changed your mind on that one. Jill from Tunbridge Wells. Are you angry, Jill?
Just a bit. Well, disgusted. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
How important is it
to balance the books?
So the answer is, it is important over the long term to make sure that the private sector is growing faster than the public sector, and we are able to generate the revenues for our economy and also be able to pay for our public services. But it isn't right to try and balance the books straight away when we've had a major global crisis like COVID, and every single country in the world has built up debts from that crisis. And in fact, we have lower levels of debt than most of the G7 countries. So I think trying to balance the books prematurely is actually counterproductive, because if you put up taxes and you stop businesses forming, you stop new investment and you stop economic growth, you're less likely to be able to pay down the debt over the longer term.
Happy with that?
No.
Doesn't look as though you are.
Not
so what's your follow-up question on that one?
Liz, I do not want to see my children and my grandchildren encumbered with huge debt at a time of rising interest rates, Bank of England today, and at a time of high inflation. The one thing Margaret Thatcher believed in was sound money. This is not sound economics. And the whole business about economic growth, tax cuts do not necessarily produce economic growth. If you look at Germany, for example, it has much higher corporation tax than we have. And indeed, even with the rises that are in the pipeline. And yet their economy is not tanking in the way that ours is tanking. So I think this question of balancing the books is really fundamental.
Sound bites or sound economics?
Well, we have lower levels of debt than countries like the US, Canada and Japan. So it's simply not true to say that we have particularly high national debt at the moment. But what I do know is that families across the country are struggling to pay their bills. And what I would do is help relieve...
15% interest rates, Liz. I remember those days. I had to pay a mortgage of 15%. Are we going back to that level again?
No, because we've got an independent Bank of England that make decisions about interest rates, and we're nowhere near that position at all. But to say that we're going to put up taxes to the highest level and beyond the highest level in 70 years, and we think there will be no consequences for economic growth, I'm afraid I think that's wrong. And I speak to lots of companies, lots of businesses who are very concerned about the proposals to raise corporation tax. They're very concerned about the level of interest rates. They're very concerned about the regulations on their businesses at the moment. The fact is that Britain has got less competitive relative to other countries. Under these corporation tax proposals, we would have corporation tax that is 10 points higher than Ireland, and it will make us less competitive.
And Germany?
And you don't get...
Germany?
Well, Germany has a very, very different economic system from the UK.
OK. We've got time for one more question. Tom from Gateshead. Where's Tom? We'll come back to other questions. Tom, hi, sorry.
Hi, thanks very much. Liz, why did you announce a well-researched and fully costed policy in which you openly said you valued the work of teachers, nurses and police officers in Newcastle, where I work, less than you value those in Guildford, for example? We're having this election because of poor judgment and trust. Why should we trust your judgment?
Well, the reason that I immediately decided not to pursue that policy is it was being misinterpreted, in fact, in exactly the way you said, because it wasn't about teachers or nurses or doctors. And immediately, as there were concerns expressed about this policy, I said we're not going ahead with it. And I do think in politics there are times when you have to make judgments about what is right and you have to be honest with the public. And I was very honest about the situation. It wasn't a core part of my policy plank, but I'd rather be upfront and if there's a problem, make a decision and deal with it straight away. And I think you can see in my time as Foreign Secretary, in my time as Trade Secretary, I've been completely upfront about everything I've done. I've explained why I've done it. I've explained when there is a change, why there is a change. And that's the approach I would take as Prime Minister.
So the press release didn't say that. It said that it would be, in order to reach the 8.8 billion in savings, that it would be expanded out beyond civil service, beyond the civil service itself. So that's a mistake. Will you apologise? Because it was actually quite offensive.
Well, I have been very clear that I will not go ahead with this policy. and that I have made a decision to do that straight away. And I've been upfront about that. Okay. I don't think there is anything to be ashamed of saying publicly that this is not working as I wanted it to work, and therefore I have changed the position on it and I'm not going ahead with it.
OK, this gentleman had a view on that. Just wait for your microphone, sir. Can we just get a microphone down here? Thank you. You were shaking your head, sir.
I did, yeah. I hate this apologise, you know, for everything that you might have said. I just don't understand it. The opposition are always asking other politicians to apologise for what they may or may not have done, and it really doesn't sit well with me.
When somebody's asking for your vote, you don't expect to be offended?
Well,
simple as that.
What's that supposed to mean?
But
you know,
I won't intrude on this.
My point
was,
you shouldn't have done.
We are going into very, very difficult times as a country.
Yeah.
And we've just talked about that. And we need somebody leading this country who is prepared to make decisions, who is prepared to deal with issues as they arise, and is prepared to be upfront with the public.
Okay.
And I think I've demonstrated that in everything I've done, in all of the jobs I've held during this campaign.
OK, I'll come back to you, madam, if I may. If you take a seat, please, Ms Truss. It's time for my go. Everybody ready? Here we are. Glass of water. I wanted to pick up, actually, just where we'd left off there on what the gentleman was asking you about on this press release. We just want to bottom it out so we know exactly where we are. You said that public sector pay policy has been misrepresented by the media. Here's the proposal that you released. Introduce regional pay boards, tailoring pay to the cost of living where civil servants actually work, saving up to £8.8 billion per year. So how have we misrepresented you so far?
Well, what I am clear about is that policy was not about teachers and doctors. But can I be clear, Kay, that I'm not going ahead with this policy?
You can, but you said you were misrepresented. I'm just clarifying.
Because of the concerns that have been expressed.
OK.
And when something is wrong,
to clarify,
when there's an issue, I deal with it.
OK, but just to clarify whether you were misrepresented or not, you highlighted a very specific saving, £8.8 billion. How did you reach that figure?
Well, I don't have the details, and I do think discussing a policy that I'm not progressing with...
Well, I can tell you, obviously these people, it's very pressing for these people, or certainly some of them, so we just want to bottom it out and then we're definitely there, and I'm sure you won't have to answer these questions again. It's exactly the same figure, the £8.8 billion, that was issued by the Taxpayers Alliance. They say regional-based pay could allow private sector salaries to catch up with the public sector. This can be done by freezing or reducing pay for existing roles and new positions. In other words, pay cut for nurses, doctors, firemen, police officers in less affluent areas, which is what this gentleman was saying. That wasn't what you were proposing. You've changed your mind.
Absolutely, that was not my intention. But given the concern that was caused, I took an immediate decision not to proceed with this policy.
OK.
And I am somebody who immediately, if there are issues of concern and those are not delivering what I want to deliver, I will make a decision to do the right thing, and that's what I've done.
Not just this gentleman here, but Ben Houchen, the Conservative Mayor of Tees Valley, said there's no way you can do this without a massive pay cut for 5.5 million people, including nurses, police officers and our armed forces outside of London. Do you accept that you made a mistake by announcing the policy?
I do accept that the way the policy has been interpreted to cover those people was not right, and that's why I took an immediate decision not to go ahead with it.
You offended people, though. You misread the mood. You accept that it was a mistake?
What I've said is I absolutely accept that it wasn't the right policy to deal with this situation, and therefore I withdrew the policy immediately. And I'm somebody who is honest and upfront, Kay. I dealt with the issue immediately after the concerns were expressed about how this policy had been interpreted, and I've dealt with it straight away.
OK, it was a mistake, though.
Well, as I've said, I've withdrawn the policy. We're not going ahead with the policy. So, therefore, you know, the points you're making are about a policy that isn't happening.
No, what I'm saying is, should good leaders own their mistakes, or should they blame others?
I'm not blaming
you blame
anybody else. I'm saying that the policy has been misrepresented by various people. But what I don't want at this time when people are struggling with the cost of living is to concern people with this policy, which isn't a core part of my policy platform, and I'm not going ahead with it.
OK, let's talk about the economy as we've moved on to that. I want to talk to you about your plans to help the worst off, if I may. We've spoken to Selina. She's a single mum in the northeast of England. She works part-time to support her 3 children and earns just over £10,000 a year. What will you do to help her when her energy bills reach £500 a month in January?
So, first of all, I'll take immediate action to reverse the national insurance rise. And
won't help her. She earns less than £12,570, so she won't benefit.
Well, also the green energy levy will be taken off fuel bills.
That's £150, and so that's a drop in the bucket, really, isn't it?
And what
apparently
I will also
something like 9 days of energy for her.
And what I will also do is work to increase the amount of supplies we're getting out of the North Sea so that we can get more gas into our system, so we can move forward on dealing with the energy crisis and energy security.
Not
because
by January,
ultimately, these problems can only be dealt with by, first of all, making sure Putin is defeated by the Ukrainians so that we don't have this energy supply problem, and also by releasing more reserves in the North Sea. I'm also in favour of fracking in areas that support it, so we get more of our own domestic energy supply. But what I can assure you, Kay, is I will do all I can to help people who are struggling with the cost of living. I understand that people are going through difficult times, and if there are any more available resources, of course I would put that to helping people with the cost of living.
Let me tell you what Selina said, if I may. These are Selina's words. I'm really worried about how I'm going to keep my children warm and fed. This is going to cost lives if they don't do something now.
But this is why it's so very important that we offer support to businesses, that we...
It's not going to help her.
Well, it will help her because the real danger we're in as a country, and this is what the Bank of England has said today, is we're facing a recession. And what a recession would mean is people losing their jobs, businesses going out of business, people struggling across the country. So that's why it's so important we do things like keeping corporation tax low, keeping personal taxes as low as possible, getting things like infrastructure projects done quicker to grow the economy. That is ultimately the way we are going to deal with this crisis, is through economic growth.
OK. Here's an idea. What about the windfall tax? Shell posted profits of £9.3 billion between April and June. If we put that another way, Shell made £1,190 per second. So since I started this sentence, they've made £17,000 in profit. Why don't we have another windfall tax?
Well, the problem with a windfall tax is that it might secure money in the short term. But what it does is it puts off companies investing in Britain in the long term because they think at any point they could be taxed. And I think that is a problem. What we need to show is Britain's open for business. We're a country that keeps to our word of what our taxes are. And windfall taxes are essentially surprise taxes that companies don't know that are happening. What I would do instead, Kay, is make sure we're incentivising the likes of Shell to be releasing more resources from the North Sea to actually help the problem that we face, which is a lack of energy supply.
The head of BP said that his business would continue to invest if there was another windfall tax.
It's not just BP, though. It's the signal that it sends to every business across the country that the government is willing to give you a surprise tax. And I think that is a problem for Britain. I've already talked about how our corporation tax rate is uncompetitive compared to other countries. If we also have a reputation for levying a surprise tax on any industry that makes a profit, that is a big problem for our country.
Shell is giving their shareholders £6.5 billion. People at home watching who can't afford to heat their homes come the winter will be horrified at that.
But look at who these shareholders are. These shareholders are often people with pensions, pension funds. Shareholders are not, all sort of men in suits sitting in offices. There's no such thing as free money. And I just think we've got to be very careful If the UK gets a reputation for arbitrarily taking money and tax that we've not sort of done through the official tax system, I think that's a problem.
OK, let's move on to foreign affairs. We've talked about it a little bit. Do you want a sip of water?
Yeah.
You're very welcome. Talking about Taiwan, I'm sure that we've all seen, haven't we, what's been happening in Taiwan over the last few days. As Foreign Secretary, you told a select committee last month that we should have armed Ukraine earlier. Should we arm Taiwan now?
Well, what we do need to make sure is that democracies like Taiwan are defended. And yesterday I put out a statement with my fellow G7 foreign ministers about the very difficult situation in Taiwan and concern about the rhetoric that we're hearing from China, the escalatory rhetoric. Of course, we have a very secure control system for exports in the United Kingdom, and we do licence exports to Taiwan at the moment, exports that are provided by the private sector.
So should we arm them or not?
Well, what I'm saying is we already licence equipment to go to Taiwan.
OK.
And it's a long-standing policy of the UK government to do that.
OK, you said to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee in June, month before last, we should have done things earlier. We should have been supplying the defensive weapons into Ukraine earlier. We need to learn that lesson for Taiwan. Every piece of equipment we have sent takes months of a training. So the sooner we do that, the better. So just to clarify, we do licence arms that go there, but that is as far as we're going to go at this stage.
Yes, that is as far as we will go at this stage. But we are working with our allies very closely on this because there are countries like the United States, Japan, who also are extremely concerned about the future of Taiwan. And what we need to do is work collectively. And I have championed the G7 acting together as an economic NATO to challenge some of China's economic coercion practices, but also to make sure we're looking at the security situation and making sure democracies like Taiwan are protected. I'm sure you can understand, Kay, that I can't go into every detail of those conversations
because I want
on
you to
TV.
Sure.
But it's a very important principle that we do not allow aggressors to invade democratic places.
We've seen Nancy Pelosi, another strong, influential woman, in Taiwan this week. Will you visit Taiwan if you're Prime Minister?
We currently have a long-standing...
So yes or no question, really?
No.
We
have a long-standing position that the Foreign Secretary, the Ministry of Defence and the Prime Minister don't visit Taiwan.
Let me talk to you about Ukraine. Was it an error of judgment to say you'd support Brits going to fight in Ukraine?
What I was very clear about is that I supported the cause of the fight in Ukraine, but I've always been clear that the travel advice is that British people should not go to Ukraine.
No, what you said was, I do support that when Zelensky called for international volunteers. Ukrainians are fighting for freedom, not just for Ukraine, but the whole of Europe. And you did support Brits going to Ukraine to fight.
Well, what I supported...
You had to be corrected by your own Defence Secretary.
What I was saying is that I supported the cause in Ukraine.
OK. Your Foreign Office website said Brits travelling to fight in Ukraine could be committing an act of terrorism. Did you know that when you said it?
Well, what I've said is that I support the cause in Ukraine, and actually I've done a lot of work to support British citizens who have been detained in Ukraine, who've been there in the long term, and the Foreign Office has provided those people with
support. Are you sorry that people misinterpreted what you were saying?
Well, what I have said is that the advice was very clear, the travel advice was very clear, and I announced that publicly, that people shouldn't go to Ukraine. But I think what is happening...
It wasn't very clear, because we spoke to people in Poland who were going into Ukraine, who were Brits that had crossed the border and were then subsequently going into Ukraine.
Well, there have been many British people going into Ukraine during the war, but we are very clear about our travel advice.
OK, I've got some quick-fire questions for you, if I may. Here we go. In your first meeting with the Queen, will you apologise for wanting to abolish the monarchy?
Well, I've already met the Queen, and she's been far too polite to raise that issue with me, and I will not be raising it with her.
OK, but if she did, would you apologise?
Well, I was wrong. I was wrong to say what I did at the time.
OK. Will you be apologising to the First Minister of Scotland when you see her?
No, I won't.
What's the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
I'm certainly not going to say that on TV.
Oh, was it that naughty?
Well, my daughters are watching, so I don't want them getting any ideas, Kay.
Yeah. Being Prime Minister is the most invasive, exposed period in any politician's life. Is there anything that you feel that you would want to come clean with the audience here in the studio and at home?
Because there's no one else listening, so it's all fine, I can just tell.
Anything that you need to get off your chest?
I can tell you, Kay, there are no skeletons in my closet. I think everything I've ever said and done is known about very publicly.
Would you remove the whip from Boris Johnson if he's found to have deliberately misled Parliament over Partygate?
I'm not making any prejudgments about that.
Why not?
Well, I'm not making prejudgments. I'll see what the committee says.
But if they say deliberately misled Parliament?
As I say, I'm not making any prejudgments about that.
What one changed?
By the way, I'm very clear he didn't mislead Parliament.
Well, we'll see what the what the committee says. What one change to the system would you make to restore integrity? Because there's a lot of people here in the studio. Thank you. Not just here in the studio, but watching at home as well. You know, integrity has been lost in the Westminster bubble. What would you do to change it?
Well, I think the answer to restoring integrity isn't introducing more rules, because we have endless rules and codes. The issue is about clarity and leadership and doing what you say you will do and following through on your promises. What I would also do as Prime Minister is restore the Chief Whip to number 12 Downing Street. The Chief Whip was moved out by Alistair Campbell and replaced with the Press Office. I think that was a mistake because it reduced the link between the Prime Minister, the Chief Whip and the Parliamentary Party. And I would make sure we had zero tolerance for bad behaviour in the Parliamentary Party, but we're also supporting MPs. Because as you say, you know, being Prime Minister is an exposed job, but actually being an MP at the moment is pretty difficult. You know, there's all kinds of difficult things said about you on social media. You know, it can be very difficult for people's family lives. So at the same time as making sure we have discipline and, you know, making sure people are honest and behave themselves, we also do need to offer MPs that welfare and support
a new ethics advisor. And you stand by if you would. A new ethics advisor.
Well, I will look at the role of the ethics advisor, but you know, I'm somebody who does act with integrity, and I think people have seen that in every job I've done. And I slightly worry about outsourcing ethics to somebody else. As Prime Minister, I should know the difference between right and wrong. And of course, there need to be proper independent complaints procedure. There needs to be proper whistleblowing procedures. But I would want to look at how those things are structured.
OK, you were loyal to the PM despite parties during lockdown, or when he promoted a man who groped colleagues, or when he was rewriting the rules to help out his mates. Throughout that, you stood shoulder to shoulder with a man who has betrayed the office of Prime Minister.
I don't agree with that characterisation, Kay. I supported Boris Johnson for the leadership. I think he did a good job as our Prime Minister. He delivered Brexit. He delivered the vaccines. He also did a fantastic job of leading the free world in standing up to Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. Yes, he made mistakes. That's absolutely true. You know, he said sorry for the mistakes he made, but I think it's completely wrong to characterise him in that way.
I don't know. What does the audience think?
Hear, hear.
Yeah, agreed. No. OK.
So, I think it's opinion is divided on that issue. I think we can hear from people in the audience. But I have worked closely with Boris Johnson. I know the difficult times he went to. You know, he was in very serious trouble when he had COVID. And, you know, it's been a very, very difficult time to be in government. But look, you know, many mistakes were made during lockdown, Kay, you know, by many people. And I just think to sort of say that this was the, you know, crowning problem is not right.
Yeah, some in charge of policy, some not. A final question for you just before we let you go. You were a Remainer, and now you're not. You supported Brits to fight in Ukraine, then you didn't. You wanted to build on the Green Belt, and now you don't. You wanted to abolish the monarchy, and now you don't. You wanted to arm Taiwan, and now I'm not sure if you're saying whether you do or not. You wanted civil servants...
we do provide them with those
You wanted to
facilities.
cut civil servants' pay in the regions, and then you said you didn't. Will the real Liz Truss please stand up?
OK, I'm somebody who, I didn't come from a traditional Conservative background. My first political experience was going on a CND march with my mother, age 7. I then, as a teenager, joined the Liberal Democrats. I'm not sure how much I should be held to account for things I said when I was 18 or 19. But I've always had a belief that we can be a more successful country, that people should be able to control their own lives. I've always believed in the principle of freedom. I've always believed in low taxation. And yes, my views on other issues have developed over time. But show me somebody who has the same views at 19 and 49, and I'll show you somebody who's not capable of original thought. So, yes, I have, developed my views. I've considered things differently. And I also listen to people.
OK.
And I think that's important.
Okay.
So what we've been talking about
we're
today
out of time. We have to
on
give,
the policy is I've listened
Rishi
to
the
people.
same amount of time. I did say, will the real Liz Truss please stand up? You're still sitting down.
That's just because you're trying to get rid of me, Kay.
Please do.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bear with us 1 second. Bear with us 1 second.
Thank you.
Let's get some reaction from the audience, should we? Gentleman over here, I heard who was shouting out. Gentleman here, yep, boom, there, sir, go on.
I was going to say, Liz mentioned about nothing in her closet. She mentioned about integrity. Does that mean at some point in the future, if she's proved to have lied about something, she's going to resign?
I don't know. What do you think?
That's what I wanted to ask her.
Who else has got a question? The lady here had her hand up earlier. Yes, madam?
I was just wanting to ask if she actually believed that Boris Johnson's actions had damaged the Conservative Party and their chances in the next general election.
OK. Great question. Have you obviously, or mostly are, in fact, all of you are going to be people that will be voting for our next Prime Minister. Have you received your ballot papers yet? No, you still haven't received them. You have one person, but most people haven't. OK. Well, obviously, we're moving on to the next section now of our programme. You'll be able to hear what Mr Sunak thinks, and then we're going to ask you what you think. How does that sound? Ladies and gentlemen, Rishi Sunak.
Hi, Kay.
Have a seat.
Brilliant.
So we're going to do exactly the same as we did with Liz Truss. Is that OK? We're going to start with the questions from the audience, and then I've got some questions for you as well, if that's OK.
All right.
Here we go.
Let's go.
Let's start our first question with Matthew. Matthew from Kent. There he is in the middle there. Matthew.
Good evening. Thanks, Kay. Is there a point that you would stand aside in this campaign, Mr Sunak, given opinion polls are pointing to a dominant Miss Truss win? And also we're seeing daily declarations from big Tory big guns in her favour.
Well, thanks for the question, Matthew, and the quick answer is no. And that's because, well, thank you. and you know what? That's because I'm fighting for something I really believe in, and I'm taking my ideas around the country. I'm talking to all of you, our members across the country, about what I think's best for our country at a really difficult time. And I want to have that debate with people because I passionately believe what I'm saying is right. I want to convince as many people of that as possible, and hopefully I can do that with you all tonight. But you talk about big guns. I mean, I've also had, in the MP phase of this, in Parliament, the most number of MPs support me. Not just in the first round, but in every round since. You talk about big guns coming out. I just had Nigel Lawson this morning, Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor, supporting my approach to the economy. Michael Howard, a former leader of our party, just introduced me at a hustings yesterday. William Hague, another leader of our party, my predecessor in Richmond and North Yorkshire, all supporting my candidacy. So, look, I think I've got lots of support, but I'm going to fight incredibly hard till the last day of this campaign for each and every one of your votes. The stakes are really high. I'm passionate at what I believe in, and I want to try and convince you all that I'm right.
Anybody else that's going to support Mr Sunak? I'll get a few. You're all very quiet, though. Sir, you've got a question?
Yes, hi. Now, I've been a Tory for the last 30 years, and I did stand for Parliament in 2005. Now, I've been absolutely disgusted with the level of disunity within the Tory party. So, yes, I will be supporting you. But if you do become Prime Minister, How will you ensure that you unite the Tory party so that we can win the next general election?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you asked that. It's a really important point because I think how we select this audience, we're all on the same team, right? We're all part of the same Conservative family, and we are going to need to come back together afterwards. And look, I think you can take some comfort from the fact that not only do I have the most support of MPs in Parliament, that support is drawn from every bit of our parliamentary party. People in the north, MPs in the south, MPs who voted Remain, MPs who voted Leave, experienced colleagues, the likes of which we just talked about in Matthew's question, but brand new MPs as well, MPs in rural areas and urban areas. So that's the breadth of my support, because that's the kind of person I am, that I can build a broad team around me. And that's what I'm going to do in government. I want to make sure that we have a government that represents all the talents and traditions of our amazing party, and you saw some of that on display in this leadership election early on. I want all of you to be able to look up the government and feel a piece of your view of conservatism represented. That's how we're going to bring people back together, because we all know in this room the enemy is not me or Liz or anyone else. Our real opposition is Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and I'm the person who can take the fight to them and win the next election for all of us, because that's what we all want to see, isn't it?
Actually, that's a similar question to Andrew from West London. Where's Andrew? Andrew.
I'm over here.
You're over there as well. Andrew, were you happy with that response?
Well, sort of, but I think historically we have to look at the fact that parties that are divided do not win elections. We are 2 years out, less than 2 years out from a general election. What specifics can we do? What specifics can you do to reunite the party?
Well, Andrew, you're right. We are only a couple of years out from a general election, and that's why getting on with the job as quickly as possible is really important. We don't have time to waste. So it starts day one with building that team that I talked about that does bring people back together around the cabinet table and across government. No more factions, no more who supported who in the leadership contest. We have to put all that aside the moment this contest ends and start looking forward and start delivering for the British people. We've got real challenges, and I'm sure we're going to get to talk about the economy in a minute, but that's the number one challenge. We've got to get the NHS backlogs down. We've got to get to grips with illegal migration. We've got to make sure that we provide more energy for us all at home. There's lots of challenges we've got, and we need to get on and do them fast. So if we've got a brand new team, united in purpose, to deliver for the British people and focus on the prize of winning the next election, I think that will galvanise minds. I'm the person that can bring people together and lead us to that victory.
Can I come back
very quickly, if you wouldn't mind?
So how many people in the current cabinet would you have in your cabinet?
OK, go.
Well, Andrew, look, I don't think you'd expect me to answer that. A, it's premature, as we heard from the first question. I've got a lot of work to do in this campaign, and I'm going to fight for every vote, and that's what I'm focused on right now. But I will tell you, I will build a team that reflects the talents and traditions of our entire party.
OK, the ones that
and
are still
that's what you will be able to look up at my government and see yourself and everyone else reflected in it.
Claire from Solihull. Claire.
OK, hi there,
Hi,
Rishi.
where are you, Claire?
My question is...
Hi, Claire.
Hi. The security of this country worries me greatly, with all the sabre-rattling from Russia, China, Iran and North Korea. So if you become PM, will you commit to increasing the size and budget of our armed forces to make this country once again a force to be reckoned with?
Yes, Claire. The simple answer is absolutely. And I don't want to say once again, because I think we are already a force to be reckoned with. We're an amazing country that projects our values and our influence around the world, supporting our allies. So I don't think we have to think that we're not. We already are, but there's always more we can do. Now, remember, I was the Chancellor who oversaw the largest increase in the defence budget since the end of the Cold War. That's my track record. And actually, I singled out the Ministry of Defence in the middle of the pandemic for a special treatment because they were going through a period where they were looking at future threats. They needed the certainty of knowing that they had the funding to make all those investments in the new technologies that would keep us safe. That's why I gave them special treatment.
That's not what the Prime Minister said. He said that you had to be... Actually, Ben Wallace said the Prime Minister had to overrule you.
No, that's not right. We actually do all these
Ben
things
Wallace
together.
Was wrong.
I'm not going to talk ill of any of my colleagues, but ultimately I'm the Chancellor that's responsible for the decisions on how we spend our money, and that's what I did, right? But you don't have to take my word for it there. When it came to Ukraine, what else did we do? I managed to find £2 billion from across government to send to Ukraine to support them so we can help them and protect our values and stand up to Russian aggression. But what I'm not going to do is stand here and give you an arbitrary target. And I know that's what Liz has said in this campaign, and I don't believe in that. I don't think that's the right response to defence spending. I don't believe in arbitrary targets. I believe in taking a threat-based approach. I believe in looking at the threats we face and then allocating spending accordingly. So what I can commit to you, Claire, is this. I will tell you, I will invest whatever it takes to keep you and everyone else in our country safe, because that is the first duty of a Prime Minister, and it's certainly the first duty of a Conservative Prime Minister.
Follow-up from this lady here. Just wait for the microphone, madam, if you would. There we go.
Thank you. You were also the Chancellor that introduced Eat Out to Dine Out at a cost of £850 million. And according to the University of Warwick, that was responsible for an increase of new COVID cases of between 8 and 17%.
Well, actually, that's one study that said that, and I don't think it's right. And it doesn't explain the fact that in almost every other country around Europe, everyone else experienced another wave of COVID, and they didn't all have the same policy. So it's a bit odd to blame that policy for an increase in COVID cases when that happened across Europe and indeed across most of the world. But I tell you what I was thinking at that moment. What I was looking at was a situation where we had hundreds of thousands of largely small hospitality businesses that were on the brink of bankruptcy. Because in this country, everyone was so scared and all the evidence said that no one was going to go back out again. And in an economy like ours, that would have been disastrous. And you know what's worse? 2 million people work in all those small businesses. And those 2 million people are disproportionately young, they're women, they're working part-time, they're people who are coming off unemployment benefit into work. So as a matter of social justice, I wanted to protect those jobs, those families' livelihoods. That's why I did it. And everywhere I go in this campaign, across the country, I have people who come up to me and say thank you for that, because it saved our business and it saved those jobs.
Tom? They like that one, Mr Sunak. Tom from Bury St Edmunds.
I'm right behind you, Kay.
There we go.
I'm always behind everybody.
Tom,
that sounded slightly ominous.
I'm so sorry.
I'm a town councillor for Bury St Edmunds.
Oh, brilliant.
Thank you. And we lost our Kings Road NHS dentist. They were brilliant. That was in 2018. Now some of us are going around talking like tube stations. Mind the gap, mind the gap. What can be done? It's 2022. We need NHS dentistry because, frankly, a lot of us cannot afford to go private. And we have fantastic private dentists in Bury St Edmunds, but we need our NHS back. What can you do? How soon can you do it? That's the problem. I'm running out of teeth.
What happened to your teeth? What happened to your teeth?
I lost them.
Well,
oh, goodness.
Yes.
We're getting an actual view right now in the camera in your mouth. Well, actually, it's funny, as I've said, I have 7 fillings, and that's because I drank an enormous amount of Coke when I was a youngster, so I feel your pain. And we do need good dentistry. Yeah. And look, the NHS, first of all, is everyone's #1 public service priority. And I grew up in an NHS household. You may have heard on this campaign, my dad was a GP. He
never mentions it.
And my mum... just checking, you never know, right? And my mum ran a chemist where I grew up. So I spent my time working in that. I understand how important, especially primary care is. But look, if we're going to get to grips with this and make sure that there is money for NHS dentistry, we just have to be bolder about reforming the NHS to get more efficiency out of it. Now, I'm someone who you can absolutely trust with the NHS. I'm someone who did something quite difficult, and that's create a new funding stream to support not just the NHS, but social care, because it does start with putting more resources in to help recover from the pandemic. Wasn't an easy thing for me to do. Lots of people are upset with me about it, but I believed it was the right thing for the country, the right thing to support our fantastic NHS doctors and nurses. But money's not enough. We need to reform things so we can get more efficiency and invest in things like dentistry. I'll give you one example of something that I'm prepared to do, which is a bit bold, it is a bit radical, and not everyone will love it, but I want to show you that I'm going to bring some change, and that's tackling missed appointments. Now, we have over 10 million missed appointments every year, and it's not just GPs, it's in hospitals. At the same time, we've got lots of people sitting there anxiously waiting for treatment, and I've said that's not acceptable. So we need to be tougher on missed appointments, because if we are, then if people can cancel them in advance properly, we free up all that extra capacity, and none of us have had to pay an extra penny in taxes to do that.
How's that workable, though?
Thank you.
How's that workable? How's that workable? What about people who can't afford to pay the £10 and they miss so they can't afford to pay their fine? Do they not get treatment in future? What happens?
Well, actually, Kay, as I said, you don't have to do it on people's first missed. It can be for people who missed a second appointment, because there are just so many that there's a lot of space in the system. And I do think it's right to actually say, hang on, we believe in an NHS that's free at the point of use, but it's not free at the point of misuse. And when people don't show up for appointments, they are depriving other people of treatment that they need. So there's someone equally vulnerable waiting there, sitting on a waiting list, waiting to see their consultant or their GP, and they're not getting that chance because someone else has just not bothered to show up, and that's not all right. And look, there will be some people like you who say, oh, gosh, maybe we shouldn't do that. But if we're not prepared to be...
It's not me saying it, it's the Lancet saying it.
If we're not prepared to do things differently,
but that's okay, that miss their appointments for all sorts of reasons, and they can't afford
you can be
these
compassionate
guys.
first time, but at the end of the day, if we all want to cut taxes in this country, if we want to find money to spend more on dentistry, we have to be prepared to do things differently, challenge the system, and that's what I'm prepared to do. Because I want to have great healthcare, I want to have great dentistry for you and for my future fillings, but I do want to be able to cut your taxes too. We're only going to be able to do that if we're going to reform things and do things differently. That's the kind of Prime Minister I'm going to be.
You can only be compassionate once. Jeff from Devon. Jeff, where are we, Jeff?
Over here.
Hey, Jeff. Oh, you're all over here today.
Yeah. Gosh,
Hi.
right. Is it Jeff, was it?
Jeff. Yes, Rishi, yes.
Yeah.
Hi. Hiya. Given the problems we've had with borders control and obviously the massive controversy with the Rwanda policy, what's your plan to cut illegal channel crossings?
Yes, great question, and something I've been talking a lot about over the last couple of weeks. Look, you know, I'm the product of this country's extraordinarily compassionate approach to welcoming immigrants to our shores. My family are beneficiary of that, probably others in the audience, and it's something that we should all feel really proud of. It's something that Britain is amazing at, and even most recently, Ukraine, Hong Kong, Syria, Afghanistan, we showed our compassion. But it is also absolutely right that we have control over our borders, because all the people I just mentioned came here legally, and what is not right is for people to break the rules and come here illegally. The scenes we see on our TV screens and small boat crossings are wrong, and they need to stop. And I'm prepared, again, to do some different things, to be bold and radical, to stop them. There's a 10-point plan on my website with a video, so you please go and have a look at that tonight, and anyone else that's interested in this topic. I'll give you 2 examples of things that I'm prepared to do now. One is we need to change the definition of asylum and move away from this European definition, which has become very broad. It's exploited by lefty lawyers and means it's very hard to remove people. I suggest moving to a different definition, another legal standard, internationally, used by, I think, the Australians and others, and that is a much tighter definition and will allow us to reject more people. So that's one thing we can do. The second thing is we've got to get smarter about our foreign policy. At the moment, we'll happily talk to a country and talk about the trade deal we're going to give them and maybe even the aid that we're going to send that country, but we don't then also say, hang on, you have to take back your failed asylum seekers. Well, that's not right. We should be more joined up. We should be tougher about that. So that's just 2 of the things in my 10-point plan. But fundamentally, we must get a grip of this. We have to make the Rwanda policy work. I will do whatever it takes, including legal changes if required, to make it work so we get control of our borders. Although we're a compassionate country and will always be, it's entirely right, and many of us voted Brexit for this reason, that we are in control of who's coming here. That's a simple thing, and I will deliver it as PM.
OK. Applause on that one. Gentleman there, really quickly, because we need to move on. If we can just stretch over with the microphone for you, sir. There we go. Your question, really quickly.
So we currently have a points-based immigration system. Do you propose any changes, or are you happy to keep it as it is?
So, look, on immigration, we have to tackle this question of illegal... Jeff's question on illegal migration. We shall tackle that robustly and radically, so that's part 1. Now, with the rest of immigration, right, there's a couple of things. I want to be pragmatic about this. So I want to make sure that we're also supporting our economy to grow. And that means having an immigration system that actually welcomes the best and the brightest from around the world. Because if we want to grow our economy, if we want people here who are going to set up companies of the future, who are going to come and research in our universities, who are going to come and work at some of our fastest-growing companies, actually, we want to have a visa regime that makes us the best place in the world for all those people to come. I started reforming the system as Chancellor, and as Prime Minister, I want to finish the job so that the best and the brightest, wherever they are around the world, America, India, Brazil, wherever, they think, the UK is the place I want to come. Because if we can attract them here, it's going to be good for all of us, it's going to be good for the economy, and that's something that I want to deliver.
OK, we've got a question from Alexander on Trust. Alexander, you've got a question for Alexander's just
Hi, Alexander.
Yeah, good to see you, buddy. What does honesty mean to you in politics and leadership?
Great question. So look, honesty, in a sense, it means telling you the truth, right? And even when that's not easy. And I think you can see in this leadership election, that's what I'm doing, right? And that first question at the beginning of how I'm doing in the polls and all of that, right? I am saying some things that are maybe not the easiest thing in the world to hear. I'm not sitting here or standing here promising you tens and tens of billions of pounds of goodies straight away, because I don't think that's the right thing to do for our economy. I think it's risky. I think it risks making the inflation problem far worse and costing you all far more. And you know what? My life would be far easier if I wasn't saying that, right? But I want to be honest with you. I want to be straight with the country about the challenges we face and what is going to be required to fix them. And that's why I think you can trust me on this, because I'm prepared to do that, even though it's going to cost me politically.
Et tu, Mr Sunak, though. Et tu, Mr Sunak. We've seen the images of what you were allegedly... Nadine Dorries, I think it was, who came up with this. I don't know, has anybody seen it? Yeah. Stabbing you in the back. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Sorry, Kay, what do you...
Well, my point is we're talking about trust. You can't be trusted.
Which bit
is what Nadine Dorries...
You knife in Boris for your own interest.
There you go.
Right, perfect, right, OK, let's address that. That's actually great that you've raised it. Sorry, what was your name, sir? Stephen, right. So, yes, I worked with the Prime Minister for a couple of years, and I'm really proud of the work we achieved together, actually, and I think he deserves enormous credit for what he achieved during that time. And as I said, I'm proud to have been a part of it, and he gave me the job I had, and I'm grateful to him for it. But it got to a point where it was too difficult for me to stay. Now, we had well-documented differences of opinion on economic policy, as you can see in this leadership campaign, by the way, and it's simply impossible for a Chancellor and Prime Minister not to be on the same page when it comes to economic policy. That doesn't make sense, and there's no way that can work. So, of course, I had no choice but to go. But also, it came to a point where the government was on the wrong side of an ethical problem that I could not defend. And enough was enough for me. But it wasn't just me, Steve. It was 60 other members of Parliament all left the government at the same time, because for them, enough was enough.
OK.
And that's why we're here, because we need to change things.
In December last year, did they, Rishi? You've been campaigning for a long time, and it was perfectly timed, a cynical motivation to try and get you into number 10.
No, so that's just simply not true. So I was due to give a speech with the Prime Minister the next week, and in the conversations about putting that speech together on the economy, it was clear our differences were too big to reconcile.
OK.
So that was the reason. Plus, I think let's not look at the bars with rose-tinted spectacles here. Everyone remembers what was going on with Chris Pincher, right? Yeah. That was a serious ethical question that the government was on the wrong side of again, and I couldn't defend it. Maybe you're OK to defend that. I wasn't OK to defend it. 60 other members of the government were not OK to defend it because it was wrong. And that's why we're here, because we need to change things. We need to bring trust and integrity and decency and honesty back into politics.
OK.
And that's what I want to do as Prime Minister.
OK, I'm going to have to brush up on my Shakespearean references, I can tell. Let's bring in David from London, finally. Where are you, David? David's here. Hi, David, go on.
Hi, Kay, thank you.
David, hi.
Good evening, Mr Sunak. How will you balance the need to address the escalating cost of living crisis, particularly for those that are on lower incomes, alongside the need to keep the economy in good order and national debt not spiralling out of control?
David, your question is actually the most important one facing the country right now, right? And I'm sure many of you saw what the Bank of England had to say today. And if we in the Conservative Party need to get real and fast, because the lights on the economy are flashing red and the root cause is inflation. Now, I'm worried that Liz Truss's plans will make the situation worse. And what I want to do is different. I think the government's #1 priority should be grappling with inflation. That's what I want to do. I also want to help people with the cost of living over the autumn and winter, particularly, as you said, the people who most need our help. And that's what I announced as Chancellor. That's how I acted over the past 2 years. That's what I'll do as your Prime Minister. That's what a Conservative government should do, support those who need our help most at a time of need. But then also, I want to grow the economy. And I want businesses to be producing more. And that's how we're going to not just grow the economy and create jobs, it's how we're going to get inflation down over time. I've got a plan to do all of those things. But it all starts with not making the situation worse. Because if we just put fuel on the fire of this inflation spiral, all of us, all of you, are going to just end up with higher mortgage rates, savings and pensions that are eaten away, and misery for millions. I don't want that to happen, and that's why I am so focused on gripping inflation first.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, Mr Sunak, have a seat.
All right, thank you.
Need any water?
Yes, why not? Right.
Excellent. Right, my turn. Here we go. Let's talk about the economy to start with, should we? Today, as was being pointed out, the Bank of England saying that we're going to be in recession before the end of the year, and that's going to last until 2024. People watching at home, and I'm guessing some people here as well, facing months and months of hardship. You've been their Chancellor for the last 2 years. Why on earth should they trust you with the keys of number 10?
In fact, because they've seen me as Chancellor over the last couple of years, and I think, actually, Kay, probably the first time people really saw me was that first press conference when there was an enormous amount of anxiety in the country about what was going to happen to people's jobs, their livelihoods, their businesses, and they didn't really know who I was. I'd just been made Chancellor a couple of weeks before. But I stepped up at that moment to act boldly and radically, to design things that had never been done before in this country, like furlough, that ended up protecting over 10 million jobs, saved over 1 million businesses, helped families get through what are 2 very difficult years, and for our economy to emerge at the end of that in far more resilient shape than anyone had anticipated at the beginning. And when I go around the country, people know that that's what I did for them. They're grateful for it, and that's what I want to do as Prime Minister, because right now we face similarly large economic challenges, and it's particularly because of my experience that I'm well placed to deal with them.
Nothing you can do about recession, though, is there? Or is there?
Of course there is. Of course there is. Back to David's question, the number one thing we have to do is not make the situation worse. What is causing the recession? Right? As you heard from the Bank of England today, and I think Liz said something before, which I'm just going to correct, it's not the tax burden that is causing the recession. That's simply wrong. What's causing the recession is inflation. Right? That's the root of the problems we have, not just here, but in America and elsewhere. So the way we're going to get through this, first and foremost, is gripping inflation. Now, we will, and I always have stood by people, as you've seen me over the last couple of years, so I will help people get through the autumn and the winter, as I've done before, and then we will make the right reforms to help grow the economy in the long term. And I don't think the corporate tax proposals...
So you would come up with more money to help people get through the hardship?
Of course I would.
Do you know how much?
Look, we'll have to see the size of the problem. But look, people can see
13.3% inflation is what's predicted. That's the size of the problem.
And I don't want that to be worse. And I don't want it to last longer. So what I'm not going to do is embark on a borrowing spree worth tens of billions of pounds, put that on the country's credit card, ask our kids and our grandkids to pick up the tab, because that's not right, it's not responsible, and it's certainly not conservative.
But you're promising tax cuts without knowing where inflation will be.
I'm the one that's not sitting here now, promising tens of billions of pounds of unfunded tax cuts.
What you've actually said is no tax cuts until inflation gets under control. What amounts to under control?
When it's on a clearly downward trajectory and we have good line of sight that it is returning back to target, right?
OK.
Right. But that's why we need to be really careful about policies that will make that worse. Right, and look, if that's to the first question, I'm behind in this race.
No, I'm just a bit confused. So you're saying these income tax cuts might not happen? It depends.
You're talking about my longer-term plan?
Yes, of course I am.
Yeah, my longer-term plan, I'm confident we can deliver it, yes, right? And that was the reason I published that longer-term plan, and that longer-term plan, for those watching, was to, over time, reduce income tax rates in this country, because I believe really strongly in rewarding hard work. Hard work is a value that I think is really important. I think most Conservatives share that view, that hard work is something that should be rewarded. The best way to do that through the tax system is to reduce the rate of income tax. And I wanted to give people a sense of the direction of where I wanted to take the country and the economy. And I want to build an economy where we cut the rates of income tax over time. And we're going to do that not by asking our kids to pick up the bill. We're going to do it by being disciplined on public spending,
reforming
public
services, you're very comfortable,
and growing
we know
the economy.
Exactly what you think. What we don't probably know about is foreign affairs as much. So let me ask you about energy and food bills and how that relates to foreign affairs potentially. How high do you think that energy and food bills will have to go before we reassess our support for Ukraine?
No, I don't think that's how we're going to look at it, actually, because we can make an enormous difference between now and actually next winter in reducing our dependence on Russian energy. So in the short term, of course, we're going to step in, and I want to step in and help people more. I announced enormous support as Chancellor. As Prime Minister, I'll go further because the situation has deteriorated. But what I'm looking to is, by next winter, that we've got through this. And there's lots of things we can do to help us do that. So I'll give a couple of examples, right? So one thing we can do is improve our energy storage, because actually we can import lots of gas in the middle of the year.
That takes time, though, doesn't it?
No, we can do that relatively quickly, improved energy storage during the middle of the year. But the other thing we can do is energy efficiency. Now, many of you here, many people watching, are living in homes where we can help improve the insulation. Loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, smart temperature controls. Those are relatively small-scale interventions that don't take very long or cost a fortune, and government has got money. But if we turbocharge that programme, we can not only reduce our demand for energy, which improves our energy security, we can also save people up to £300 on their bills. Now, that's the type of thing that we should be doing.
So we can continue to support Ukraine as long as we lag our loft, is that what you're saying?
We need to be lagging our loft anyway for climate change reasons, right? Because it's good to reduce our long-term demand on energy, right? But what we do want to do is make sure we help people with their bills, and that's a good practical example of something we can do.
On the conflict in Ukraine, Boris Johnson has really thrown himself into the cause. I think everybody might agree with that. He's regarded as a hero, apparently, in Ukraine. That's what he tells us. He brandishes his missile launchers. We've seen that. Are you really tough enough to stand up to Vladimir Putin?
Well, just think for a moment. How are we currently standing up?
This is your hell yeah moment.
Yeah. So how are we standing up to Vladimir Putin? Right? How are we actually doing it? We're doing two things. Right? We're sending arms and money to Ukraine, which, as we talked about earlier, I found from elsewhere in government spending so that we could free up that money to send to President Zelensky. But what's the other way we're weakening Russia? We're doing it through economic sanctions, right? We're not sending our troops into Russia, right? It's not diplomatic measures that are making a difference, it's economic. What are we doing? We're targeting his companies, their access to global capital markets, his gold trading, his central bank reserves. That's how we're economically turning the screw on Russia. Who do you think put all those things together? I did with all my finance minister colleagues around the world, working with the Treasury Secretary in America, working with European finance ministers. We designed an international package of economic sanctions that sends a very strong message that we will not stand for his aggression. It's the most stringent set of economic sanctions the world has ever seen, and it is making a difference. And as Prime Minister, I will go further because there's more things we can do. So, yes, I'm tough enough, and I'm already delivering the measures that are actually causing him the most trouble. Thank you.
Ben Wallace, as I mentioned before, said that you had to be overruled on defence spending. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, reportedly said that you objected to the Rwanda plan during a written discussion between the departments. Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary, former Northern Ireland Secretary, has accused you of putting up huge resistance on efforts to override the Northern Ireland Protocol. It looks as though there's a recurring theme there, doesn't there? You say one thing in private and then you say something else for voter consumption. So should we believe them or should we believe you?
Well, look, when it comes to the Rwanda plan, I do believe in the Rwanda policy, but do I ask tough questions when cabinet ministers come to me and say, oh, look, we like to do this new thing? Yeah, because my job is to make sure that yours and everyone else watching and everyone in this audience's money is spent properly. That's part of my job. I wouldn't be doing my job properly if every time some cabinet minister came to me and said, oh, please, can I have X billion pounds to do this new thing? I don't say, whoa, hang on, let me just check that this actually is going to work. Is it worth us spending taxpayers' money on it?
So you think spending £120 million on sending 200 people to Rwanda is good value for money?
Yeah, well, it's a pilot, right? So the pilot bit is expensive. So you're asking now exactly the questions I was asking. So if Priti Patel or anyone else is going to say, oh, now I expressed some doubts about it, it was doubts about how we're going to make the policy work. I believe in the policy, but it's not good enough in government to just announce things. Okay. It's not good enough to put out a press release. What you need to do is deliver things. And I think what people saw from me during the pandemic as Chancellor, that I could deliver things. I actually delivered policies that worked and made a difference, which, by the way, were done in record time and were radical. And I will bring that same sense of grip and urgency and competence to all these other challenges, whether it's the Rwanda policy, whether it's the NHS backlogs.
OK, let's talk about climate. You brought it up. We're trying to whiz through these topics as best we can because, obviously, some of these people have not got their ballot papers yet, some have, and what you're telling them, both here in the studio and at home this evening, could make the difference as to whether or not you are the next Prime Minister of this country. So let's talk about the climate, should we? One issue that affects not just our finances, but, of course, our future, is your green credentials. Can I test them?
Sure.
Here we go. New coal mines, yes or no?
They're local decisions, but I don't think we should be importing coal from other places if we have it at home.
OK. What about fracking?
Where it has the support of local communities, I'm in favour of it.
OK, but we have seen some big issues with fracking, haven't we, particularly in my part of the world, in the northwest of England, where we've seen at least 3 earthquakes that apparently have been caused by fracking.
Yeah, but we also, as I said, most importantly, it has to be done with the support of local communities. But we do also have a study from, I think 3 different royal societies. I think of geologists and engineers and I can't remember the third group, but it's online somewhere, all of whom said that they believe fracking is safe and the seismic activity is not out of the ordinary. They're all the scientists who have came to that conclusion, not me. But as I said, I'm supportive of it where we can bring the local community along with us, because if we can get it to work, it's good for our long-term energy security.
Would you raise flight taxes?
Would I raise?
Flight taxes?
No.
Why not?
Well, because as Chancellor, I already made a change to airline taxation.
You did. It's not very green, though, was it?
Yes, it was, actually, because I
why.
did 2 things. One is I reversed a European rule that forced us to charge people twice when they flew inside of the United Kingdom on air passenger duty. I didn't think that was right, and after we left the EU, we could say we're not going to do that anymore. If you fly around the UK, because we believe in a United Kingdom, you should only be taxed once. But at the same time, I created a new band. For the longest haul flights, the most polluting flights, we created a brand new band with a higher level of tax. So actually it was balanced. Right? So for the people who are flying the farthest with the more emissions, they were going to pay more. For people flying within the United Kingdom, we took an advantage of Brexit
Let me ask you about onshore wind, yes or no, because I'm a bit confused on this one. Offshore wind, onshore wind, forgive me, yes or no?
No.
OK, you've changed your mind?
No, I haven't. Last night I was asked a question, I didn't fully understand it and I misspoke, but my position on that is the same as it's been.
OK, how are we going to get to net zero by 2050? With
innovation.
Yeah.
Right? And the type of future economy that I want to create is one where this, and we talked about it in the answer to the visas question from someone.
OK.
If we have an economy where this is the best place in the world for people to create, invent, discover new things, we will get there.
OK.
And we will get there in a way that lowers people's bills.
OK.
Now, look, my business background, my experience means I know how to build that type of economy in this country.
We've got to rush through this.
OK,
It's like running
well,
for a
that's
bus.
what's important on net zero.
Yeah,
but
quick fire.
there's an enormous opportunity
quick fire questions
there.
here, if you don't mind. Quick fire questions. Here we go. Do you personally support the 24-week limit on abortion?
As a personal thing, yes. I mean, these are personal decisions. They're not government decisions. I don't think there's any need to change I believe in a woman's right to choose. I don't think there's any reason to change the laws that we have.
Why have you abstained on every major vote on abortion?
Probably because I've not been in Parliament on the day.
You didn't think it was important enough to be there?
Because as Chancellor, I'm often travelling.
2015, apparently. Were you Chancellor in 2015?
No, but I mean, these are not free. I mean, I completely agree with our current system of abortion. I don't think it should be changed. Okay. So if the vote, I mean, so that's my general view. That's always been my view.
You just haven't been there when the votes have been taking place. Would you fist bump the Saudi leader Mohammed bin Salman as Joe Biden did?
I'm probably not a fist-bumping type of person, I think, probably.
Would you shake his hand, then?
I mean, yes, I would shake his hand. I think I generally... I think you do have to engage with people around the world. I don't think... and they're a country that we have a relationship with.
In a video, here it comes, from 2001, you said you didn't have any working-class friends. Have you made any working-class friends since you left university?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was a student when I said that. We all say silly things when we're younger. I mean, at the same time, I was, as you know, I was working in my mum's shop. I was out and about, cycling around, running around, delivering medicines to people, all people from all walks of life. But, you know, obviously I was a kid and I said something silly.
So you do have working-class friends now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't go around asking them what how they define themselves. I mean... I'd rather think we've kind of moved... I think we've moved beyond that as a country, actually.
How reassuring.
Yeah, I think people are less interested in where you've come from, people are interested in where you're going. And that's the kind of country I want to build, right? Where... Thank you, yeah. Right.
Let me ask you the same question that I asked Liz Truss about being Prime Minister being the most invasive, exposed period in any politician's life. Anything you want to tell us about?
No. I mean, look, I've had a relatively high-profile job for 2 years, and I think people have seen me in action, and they've seen, what I can do, they've seen... And look, much of my personal life has also been talked about earlier this year, and that was an experience that I took, that I learnt from and dealt with. So, yes, I'm used to the scrutiny.
Okay. Another simple question. Have you ever benefited financially from the use of tax havens?
No.
A venture capital firm you co-founded, Tellman Partners, was registered in the Cayman Islands. So just to clarify,
I personally
did you
have
benefit
absolutely
financially
never ever
from it?
benefited and have paid absolutely full normal taxes wherever I've lived.
Did you set up that business?
No.
OK, so you weren't a co-founder in 2009?
Not of the bit in the Cayman Islands that you're referring to. I have nothing to do with.
OK.
I mean, I happen to work with a company that has multiple offices all around the world, but that's not my responsibility. It was not running the company or setting that up.
So you weren't in any way paid by that offshore company? No connections with it?
When I was living in America, I paid all my taxes in
whatsoever?
America, and when I've lived in the UK, I've paid all my taxes in the UK. As completely as anyone else would.
OK, the reason I'm asking is that, as you know, as all our audience know, you've had to clarify your wife's non-dom status. You held permanent residency in the United States while you were setting the taxes of British voters, which is what a green card means. You're building a swimming pool at your constituency home while the public pool in Richmond is facing closure after a 400% energy hike. This has all led to a perception problem for you. People feel that you can't walk a mile in their shoes because you're walking in your Prada shoes. What would you say to them?
So, look, over the past couple of weeks, right, I've been out and about across the country talking to members of the public, and as I was saying, lots of people have come to talk to me about that press conference and furlough and what difference it made to their lives. Do you know, I was wearing the same suit in that press conference, the same shoes as that I'm wearing now, right? I'm the same person.
How much were they worth?
Yeah,
They're very slick.
I'm exactly the same person, right? I'm the same person that stood there and made sure that we helped the country through a very difficult time. And that's what I'll do as Prime Minister. And I think the British people judge people by their character and by their actions, not by their bank account. Thank you.
That certainly seems to be the case as far as the audience is concerned here, but there's plenty of people who are watching at home who would disagree with that. Perception is reality, and they think that you're too rich to be Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, the reality is one of the last things I did as Chancellor was announce significant help for people with their energy bills this autumn and winter. And to the question we had at the front, from David, I think it was, right? David's question was about helping the most vulnerable, right? People who really needed help. That's what I did. Because, look, we're all going to have a difficult time, and inflation makes everyone poorer, and that's why I'm so concerned about policies that will make it worse and last longer, and that's not right. But when we do need to help people this autumn and winter, our focus should be on the people who most need our help. And actually, when Liz is sitting here saying she's going to scrap the NHS levy, do you know who that benefits? That benefits the top 15% of earners. Right? That's what that policy does. It's not going to help the people that David was asking about with the cost of living this winter. Right? The policies I announced as Chancellor are targeted on those people because they are the people that need our help. Right? It's going to be really tough. It's going to be really tough for lots of people. And much as I want to support them to work hard and do those things, right, it's going to be just impossible for some people, and we need to help them, and that's what I did.
You can't do all of that on your own. Penny Mordaunt has backed Ms Truss. Ben Wallace has backed Ms Truss. Nadeem Zahawi has backed Ms Truss. Tom Tugendhat has backed Liz Truss. Sajid Javid, your old boss, has backed Ms Truss. Why are so many people supporting her rather than you?
Right, but Kay, it goes back to the question right at the beginning. Every stage of the parliamentary process, I had the broadest and biggest number of support.
But these are the people that have worked most closely with you, and they've decided that they prefer her.
No, well, hang on. Most MPs in Parliament, and all MPs work together in lots of different guises.
These people work around the cabinet table with you day in, day out, and they said, you know what,
actually, Tom Tugendhat and Penny Mordaunt are not in the cabinet, actually. But every single round of the parliamentary process...
Would they be in your cabinet?
I led. Right, I was the person that MPs chose every round ahead of everyone else. And since it finished, more and more people have come and joined the team. So I'm really humbled by that, and I'm delighted. And actually, as we were answering a question, that support is drawn really widely from across the parliamentary party. And I'm not going to get into who's going to have this job and that job. I've got a contest that I want to try and win. I want to be out and about talking to all of you about my ideas for the future. But I will build a team that reflects all the talent and traditions of our party, as I said. You saw a lot of that on display in this leadership contest. And as we talked about before, we're all one team. We're all one family. We're going to come together after this. We're going to serve the British people, and then we're going to take it to Keir Starmer and win the next election, because that's the real prize.
Final thought: when you go, when you look at yourself in the mirror at night just before you go to bed, and you think, all these people that have sat around the cabinet table with me, and now they don't want to work with me. They think that the other candidate's better.
But plenty of people sat around the cabinet table also support me. Right, Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, is out there right now talking about it, and lots of others. But I also, as I said, now answer to the question.
Just him.
Right.
Is
But I think we only just have one person, right? Yeah, much as we love you and we love Sky, I think that's where we tolerate just one person giving up their evening to come and talk to you later. But I've been really humbled.
Not sure how
actually.
to take that, actually.
Well, you know what? I think
that's
people...
a perfect place to end. It's lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Very nice to see you. Thanks very much.
Stay with us 1 second if you will. Stay with us. Thank you. So our candidates have had their chance to make their case, but what do the people who will decide their future make of it? We have a simple question for our audience. Are you ready, audience? We rehearsed this beforehand. After what you have heard tonight, who are you most likely to vote for? As you know, you need to press 1 and then send if it's Rishi Sunak, and you need to press 2 and then send if it is Liz Truss. Are we all ready? Any more questions before we need to do that? Everybody knows exactly what they're going to say and do. Away you go. There we go. So we have 15 seconds when people were pressing 1 for Rishi Sunak or 2 for Liz Truss, and then pressing send, and then, as if by magic, in just a few moments' time, we'll find out what our audience here in the studio thinks about who should be the next Prime Minister of this country. Worth just pointing out at this stage that 0.3% of the electorate will decide our next Prime Minister, which means 99.7% of the electorate will not be doing that. Do you think that's fair?
Yes.
Why do you think it's fair? Gentlemen here, why do you think it's fair?
My ballot paper doesn't say who's the next Prime Minister. We have a parliamentary system. People voted for the Conservative Party, and as members, we're electing the leader. It happens to be that leader becomes Prime Minister. This is a basic understanding of our system.
Thank you, gentlemen up here, really quickly with a check shirt. Yep.
It's exactly the same as what Labour do when they chose...
OK. Now, as with all things with live television, the technology has crashed. So what we're going to do instead is go with a show of hands instead. Are we happy with that? Yeah. So will you allow me to say who I think has probably got more hands? Yeah. Thank you. So if you think that Rishi Sunak had a better show and as a result would potentially make the better Prime Minister of this country, can you put your hand up now, ladies and gentlemen, please? Oh, my goodness. That looks to me like an awful lot for Mr Sunak. Who would prefer Ms Truss as the next Prime Minister? Now, I wasn't expecting that, I have to say, but I think with just keeping your hands up for Ms Truss while we get some more shots just to show people at home, it looks to me as though Mr Sunak convinced you far more than Ms Truss. And I'm sorry, sir, we're almost out of time, and I have had you let you have a couple of goals. I think the only thing that he probably needs to learn from tonight is to read a bit of Shakespeare. I don't know what you think. Anyway, it's been fantastic to see you all. Thank you so much for taking the time for joining us. Thank you also to Ms Truss and also to Mr Sunak. They were amazing. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Very, very enlightening conversation and discussion from both of them. Coming up in just a few moments' time, Jayne Secker will be talking to both Mr Kwarteng and also Mr Raab. And I will see you very soon. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Kay. Well, there you have it, the battle for number 10. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak answering questions from our studio audience made up of Conservative Party members. Lots and lots to chew through, lots of really interesting points. Let's get some instant reaction to what we have just seen and heard. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, is with me here. Sam, what for you is the biggest headline of the night?
Well, wasn't that fascinating? Because what I think we had tonight was the most challenging, the most in-depth grilling that those two candidates have had so far on the campaign trail. And what set it apart was this wasn't just narrowly a contest. This wasn't a debate or a set of issues just answering the concerns of Tory members. This covered the whole gamut of issues of concern to the nation for whoever wins this contest becomes Prime Minister in a month and 2 days. And what was fascinating is you saw really the two candidates' weak spots exposed pretty ruthlessly, I thought, by Kay Burley. And they were different things. So with Liz Truss, what you heard time and again was an attempt to push back at the way that she would make promises, or she would defend what at points sounded like some pretty hard positions that she'd got into. So one of the most eye-catching moments of that debate, of that encounter, was when she was asked what she'd do to help people in the cost of living crisis. And she said, "I will do all I can." Now, that's not a commitment that we've heard before. She caveated it by saying, well, based on what I can afford. But that kind of broad brush promise looks until now to have gone down incredibly well with the party. And that's what's catapulted her apparently into the lead. But at the same time, she was clearly happy to make promises. Unclear quite where some of the money was coming from, billions potentially to try and look again at doctors' pensions. She found herself being challenged by the audience on sound money. Let's hear some of what Liz Truss ended up saying to Kay Burley.
Well, what the Bank of England have said today is, of course, extremely worrying. But it is not inevitable. We can change the outcome and we can make it more likely that the economy grows. But what I can assure you, Kay, is I will do all I can to help people who are struggling with the cost of living. I understand that people are going through difficult times, and if there are any more available resources, of course I would put that to helping people with the cost of living.
You said that public sector pay policy has been misrepresented by the media. Here's the proposal that you released. Introduce regional pay boards, tailoring pay to the cost of living where civil servants actually work, saving up to £8.8 billion per year. So how have we misrepresented you so far?
Well, what I am clear about is that policy was not about teachers and doctors. But can I be clear, Kay, that I'm not going ahead with this policy?
You can, but you said that you were misrepresented. I'm just clarifying.
Because of the concerns that have been expressed.
OK,
and when something is
just
wrong,
to clarify,
when there's an issue, I deal with it.
OK, but just to clarify whether you were misrepresented or not, you highlighted a very specific saving, £8.8 billion. How did you reach that figure?
Well, I don't have the details. I can tell you, Kay, there are no skeletons in my closet. I think everything I've ever said and done is known about very publicly.
What was so interesting about the way that Liz Truss responded under the spotlight is where challenged, she would dig in, not necessarily offering any more information, but when challenged, she refused to apologise on that public sector pay gaffe where you just saw her being challenged over claiming that the media misrepresented, but then being unable to explain that. Challenged over why she did a U-turn on British fighters to Ukraine, she just said she never admitted, really, to making a mistake. On restoring trust, as you just heard her say, there are no skeletons in her closet. There was a rider that aren't already known. Will that come back to haunt her? We don't know. We asked both candidates that. It's the eternal question for politicians. But interestingly, she refused to commit to a new ethics advisor, necessarily appointed a new ethics advisor. I think what we got from Liz Truss is somebody who, like Boris Johnson, can be stubborn, like Boris Johnson, doesn't back down. What we got from Rishi Sunak was something very different. What he faced a challenge on was his record, personal and political. Let's hear a bit of how he was forced to defend the Help Out to Eat Out scheme.
You were also the Chancellor that introduced Eat Out to Dine Out at a cost of £850 million. And according to the University of Warwick, that was responsible for an increase of new COVID cases of between 8 and 17%.
Well, actually, that's one study that said that, and I don't think it's right. We need to change the definition of asylum and move away from this European definition, which has become very broad. It's exploited by lefty lawyers and means it's very hard to remove people. Fundamentally, we must get a grip of this. We have to make the Rwanda policy work. I will do whatever it takes, including legal changes if required, to make it work.
You've been campaigning for a long time, and it was perfectly timed, a cynical motivation to try and get you into number 10.
No, that's just simply not true. So I was due to give a speech with the Prime Minister the next week, and in the conversations about putting that speech together on the economy, it was clear our differences were too big to reconcile. Okay. So that was the reason. Plus, I think let's not look at the bass with rose-tinted spectacles here. Everyone remembers what was going on with Chris Pincher, right? Yeah. That was a serious ethical question that the government was on the wrong side of again. I'm the same person that stood there and made sure that we helped the country through a very difficult time. And that's what I'll do as Prime Minister. And I think the British people judge people by their character and by their actions, not by their bank account. Thank you.
And what's really amazing, Jane, about all of those bits of the Rishi Sunak grilling is that here we have somebody who was a relatively short-lived Chancellor as they go, repeatedly being forced to defend his record, whether it was did he knife Boris Johnson while in the job, or whether or not his stewardship of the economy is now responsible for such high inflation. Now, if you look at his rival, Liz Truss is the longest-serving cabinet minister, yet it's Rishi Sunak for whom his record is the issue that audience members and questions by Kay Burley repeatedly came back to. Rishi Sunak's inheritance, I think, was the thing that came under the spotlight the most today. I think it was Liz Truss' plans for the future, her stubbornness, that was really highlighted in the last 90 minutes.
OK, Sam, thanks very much for that snap instant analysis. Well, we've also got the two representatives of the two candidates who we spoke to earlier. They've stayed behind to react to it. For Rishi Sunak, we have Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. And for Liz Truss, we have the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng. And Dominic Raab, can I come to you first, just because we just had that audience vote there at the end. The national polls amongst Conservative leaders put Liz Truss well ahead, but clearly in that audience vote at the end there, he did enough to win people over. Were you surprised that so many people in the audience appeared to be won over by Rishi Sunak?
No, I wasn't. And I think, first of all, in terms of the arguments, by the way, I thought it was a good debate and both candidates acquitted themselves well. And I thought the format was useful for teasing out the real issues. But I just felt Rishi was more credible on the economy, more compelling when it comes to the issue of uniting the party. And actually, in that bit at the end where both candidates faced tricky questions, he responded very strongly. And as we saw, I think he got, of the two candidates, the most applause. And I think by something like 75% won the show of hands in the audience. And the truth is, the more people see of Rishi Sunak, the more compelling and the more they warm towards him, and the more that this contest will go our way.
Kwasi Kwarteng, I mean, we don't know how these voters felt beforehand. We know that the majority of them said to us that they were undecided. But do you think that Liz Truss perhaps didn't quite hit the mark tonight?
Look, I think she did a good job, but I think Rishi was very fluent. And he was slick.
More fluent than Liz Truss?
But where I disagree with him was on the fundamentals of what he said. I don't believe that you grow an economy by raising taxes. He made the point that the recession was caused by the inflation. But why would you increase taxes if people are suffering from the cost of living? He also said something which Ben Wallace directly questioned a week ago in relation to the defence settlement. Rishi claimed that was entirely his doing, but Ben suggested that the Prime Minister might have had a hand in that. So there were a number of things. And, of course, there was the question about his loyalty and his support for the Prime Minister. I think Rishi did a good job in answering that. But these are the kinds of doubts that many people, many of our members, have. And it was very good that they were aired. I think Rishi did well. He answered many of those challenges effectively. But these are the kinds of questions that are going to keep cropping up. And it's very fair that they should do so.
Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, she did dig in, as Sam Coates was pointing out, to lots of the questions she was asked by the audience and by Kay. Not willing to apologise, not willing to really row back on many things that she had said. Do you think that is the right strategy? There are those who will say it's good to be confident in your beliefs, but you also don't want to come across as being too strident.
Well, she's not strident at all. Actually, the thing that she was questioned about most by Kay was the regional pay. And she said that that was something that she felt she had to act quickly and decisively. She's a very sincere politician. She's straightforward. According to her own words, she's not as slick as many other presenters. But she's sincere, she's honest, she's hard-working. And I think she'll be a fabulous Prime Minister.
Dominic Raab, why do you think Rishi Sunak's record is something that people seem so keen to scrutinise? As Sam Coates was saying, you know, he has been a Chancellor for a relatively short period of time. Yet and a lot has happened during that period of time, it has to be said. Yet there is a great deal of focus and a great deal of scrutiny on what he has done.
I think being Chancellor of the Exchequer is the second biggest job in government, and after being Prime Minister. And to be honest with you, I thought the most comfortable moments for Rishi was when he got the chance to answer why he took the measures he did to help people through the pandemic, the 12 million jobs that were saved as a result of that unprecedented intervention in response to unprecedented times. How he's got the economy going and what his plans are for the future. So I think in politics you expect a combination of have your record scrutinised, but also your plans for the future. And I thought he dealt with that grilling particularly well, and that shows, I think, he's thought things through. He didn't get hung up in the same way as Liz did on a reversal of a regional pay policy that had just been announced, because he thinks things through. And I think that's an important characteristic in a Prime Minister, particularly at this time when there are so many risks around with inflation, with interest rates, and I think that just reinforced his credibility.
Well, we thank you both so much for coming along this evening and staying along after the discussion.
Well, hang on, you started with him and then ended with him, so I'm very, very...
Go on, have the last word, very briefly, Kwasi Kwarteng.
No, I just want to say very quickly that Liz is not the slickest presenter. She said that. But she's sincere, hard-working and trustworthy. And that's what we've got to remember. We've got to have someone that we can trust and that can be trusted to deliver. And Liz is that person.
Let it not be said that we are not even-handed. Kwasi Kwarteng and Dominic Raab, thank you both very much indeed. Well, let's just see how Tory supporters out in the country feel about what they have heard this evening. We've got a sense from the audience what they thought. But let's go to Mari Aurora. She is up there in Worcester and has been gauging reaction there. Mari, which candidate seemed to win over the voters where you are? And what do they think about how both performed?
Well, it's still a very mixed bag. I would say the Liz Truss supporters seem to have kind of solidified their support for Liz Truss. Rishi Sunak supporters similar, and some undecided supporters now veering toward Rishi Sunak. But let me take you over so we can speak to them. So to start with, this is Adele. She's a Liz Truss supporter. So why are you sticking with Liz after watching that debate?
Well, I think they both perform really well. Rishi's obviously a very slick performer. He speaks very strongly on the economy, and he said the economy is the most important thing. I'm not sure I agree with him. I think there are other things that are just as important. You know, the issues that we've got in our healthcare, and his argument with that one, because he's less strong on that area, was to issue this fine for people who don't attend appointments, and I think that will affect the poorest and most vulnerable in society unfairly, where Liz said that the money they got ring-fenced for social care, that she would direct through to the social care, because there's a big backlog there. And I thought that was a more convincing argument for me. That was just one of the things, you know, the substance of what they had to say. So, yeah, I'll still be with Liz Truss, I think. Yeah.
OK, so Adele there, not convinced by Rishi Sunak's promises around the NHS. Now, if we speak to Christine and George over here, they both were undecided and are now convinced by Rishi Sunak. So, Christine, tell me why Rishi Sunak won you over.
I think Rishi Sunak came over as very strong, very principled, and very honest. And I think that's what the public need, is a politician who they can trust. I think you can trust him with the economy. He's had a great experience with the economy. He's been a very good Chancellor. He's looked after people during the pandemic, which seems to be glossed over, the cost of the pandemic, by the general public. And I think he would make a fine Prime Minister. I think he's not fazed by difficult questions. Liz Truss, I thought, did very well. But to me, she's a good trade minister. I just can't see her as being a strong enough Prime Minister. I don't think she's got the experience and the drive. I think
So you can
I think Rishi, sorry.
No, we can see Christine not convinced by Liz Truss there. I just want to squeeze in one more voter before we leave. So Mark over here, still not convinced by either. Why are you still on the fence, Mark?
Well, I think both of them are excellent, actually. I think they're both appointable, and I think they both beat Keir Starmer, and I was particularly pleased to hear Liz Truss tonight, because I was just a bit worried that whether she was strong enough to do that, and she's convinced me that if she gets it, she will do a great job. I knew Rishi was a great performer, and I think both of them, either of them now, will keep the Conservative flag flying high.
OK, so as you can see here in Worcester, still very much all to play for. But what I would say is we've had so many people on the fence here. I'm just going to ask very quickly this room, put your hands up if you're now voting for Rishi Sunak. Put your hands up if you're voting for Liz Truss. And put your hands up if you still don't know. OK, as you can see, almost an even split, so we still don't know in Worcester. Back to you in the studio.
What more can we do, Mari? How many more questions can we ask for them? Mari Aurora there. Thanks so much in Worcester. Well, let's get some snap analysis from our three special correspondents. Helen Ann Smith on business and the economy, Ashish Joshi on the NHS and social care, and Thomas Moore on climate change. And before the debate, we asked you all what you thought was going to feature, what you thought was going to be important. Helen Ann, given what we've heard today from the Bank of England, the cost of living was a big thing that you thought would feature. But what did you think you heard? Any solutions?
Well, really interestingly, I think there was a big opportunity for the candidates to really show that they grasped the gravity of the moment and really understood the severity of the crisis that people are going to face this winter. And there was a lot of big arguments, weren't there, about tax and growth, and a lot of these arguments we have heard before. They're quite well trodden. But there was almost nothing about very specific, targeted packages of measures that, frankly, are going to be needed this winter based on what the Bank of England said today, a long recession, spiralling inflation, energy bills 3 times what they were last winter. And I think it's debatable whether either of them really sort of showed that they truly understood just how very serious it's going to be for some families this winter. Very well-trodden arguments about tax and growth, and we can argue about those, but I was surprised that there wasn't anything a bit more specific, a bit more agile. OK. Ashish, what about the NHS? Rishi Sunak, of course, again, talked about his heritage within the NHS, his dad being a doctor, his mum being a pharmacist. He talked about missed appointments, but do you think there could have been more about the NHS?
There could definitely have been more about the NHS. I think this was a missed opportunity for both candidates. I think NHS Trust leaders will look at this debate this evening and say nothing was said to address the problems that exist already and the problems which are coming to the NHS further down the line. Nothing pledged, no more new money, nothing to address the workforce issues. Liz Truss talked about the efficiencies within the system. So did Rishi Sunak. They talked about the existing money that's already earmarked with the health and social care levy. And most people have looked at Rishi Sunak's idea about £10 fines for missed GP appointments. That will not solve the NHS crisis. So it was an opportunity for both of them to really address what is happening in the NHS and social care sector. I think both failed.
Finally, let's talk climate change with Thomas Moore. And beforehand, we said we weren't sure whether it would be a really big concern for many members of the audience. Liz Truss didn't really get challenged about it at all, did she?
She didn't, no, but she did, in the context of both energy security and indeed energy bills, talk about oil and gas from the North Sea twice. And I think that will concern many environmentalists, that her go-to on both occasions is fossil fuels, not solar and wind, which is where the country has been going up to this point now. Rishi Sunak was grilled more on this, and many environmentalists will be encouraged that he did talk about energy and efficiency, home insulation and so on, that he did give a commitment to net zero in terms of innovation, but they will be concerned that he still talks about coal mining here in the UK as a source of energy. That, again, is the dirtiest source of carbon dioxide and fossil fuels, and that will cause some concern.
OK, well, thank you, all three of you. Really interesting to get your thoughts of things you were specifically listening out for this evening. Well, let's see what some of our studio audience made of it. They sat through it all. They got up close and personal with the politicians. They got a chance to ask some pretty specific questions to them. Our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, has caught up with a few of them now. Tamara.
Hi, Jane. Yes, I'm here with some of our audience who were listening in as they try to make their decisions, Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. And I'm going to introduce you to a few of them and hear what they've got to say. First of all, I've got Zaid from Birmingham. Zaid, were you leaning in any particular direction, and did tonight change things for you?
No, I was undecided. But tonight, I think performance-wise, Rishi, I'd go with Rishi. But still, I think we've still got a couple of weeks left. Liz could, again, perform even better.
So you'll be waiting it out to make your choice.
Definitely.
And on what particular issues was Rishi the best? I mean, he obviously feels very comfortable on the economy. Was that it for you?
Yeah,
or
I think he knows the detail. Of course, he was Chancellor for 2 years, but I think he knows the detail more. And the questions that was coming his way on the economy, I think he was responding really well and really quickly as well.
And where do you think Liz Truss fell down for you, if she did at all?
Not really. I don't think she fell down in any matter, but I think in terms of details, I think Rishi mastered it a lot more, I think, but maybe because he was Chancellor, so and Liz wasn't.
And Mary, Mary's a care manager from London, and you were very impressed with what Liz Truss was saying on social care.
Yep.
I thought that she said something different from what she said before. She wants a lot more money going into social care, doesn't she?
Yes, that's why I voted for her tonight, because that's my feel and I know what people are facing out there. Yeah.
Because there's been a lot of criticism of her not wanting to raise national insurance to pay for the NHS, but you thought that she made it clear what she was actually going to do tonight.
Yes.
Were you thinking before tonight that you weren't sure what her plans were?
Yeah, I wasn't sure, but she made it clear today the way she's going to tackle the social care crisis, and I was so impressed. That's why I voted for her tonight.
And so she gets it, you think?
Yes.
She gets it.
Yeah.
But what do you fear that with these tax cuts that she might not have the money left? I mean, inflation is rising, isn't it?
Well, I know that, but I know she will deliver. She will keep to her promise. Yeah.
So you feel that she's the one for you, and Rishi, you feel doesn't have that strong emphasis on social care.
Even if he had that, he didn't mention it tonight, so. That's why. And my aim here, it was that particular
Interesting. And Lottie, what did you make of it? Who was the winner for you?
Well, I think just based on their performance tonight, Rishi put on a better show. I think he gives very straightforward answers, which I think is quite important, considering the past couple of years of politics.
You think he can restore integrity and trust? Because that's so important, isn't it, in this contest?
Well, I think either winner needs to do that. There's not really a question about that. But I just think that Rishi seems like he has a bit of the party within Westminster behind him, and I'm hoping that in 2024 he potentially will gain the electorate.
He gets stick, doesn't he, from some members saying you knifed Boris Johnson. We didn't want to get rid of Boris Johnson, and you led that. Is that an issue for you, and for you, Claire, as well? Is that an issue for you with Rishi Sunak?
Not particularly. We've seen that done in the past before. Boris did it himself, I think. So I'm more focused on the policies. I think tonight he was quite clear about looking at what was happening at the time with the Pincher case, and he just couldn't take anymore. So I think he was right in clarifying that.
Are important. You feel he would restore standards, and what about on the sort of policy issues? Did you feel that Liz Truss fell down on anything, or there was anything that you didn't know about her that you found out tonight?
I thought Truss had some very fresh ideas in terms of, especially the investment zones and things that young people really care about in terms of fixing the planning system and trying to create more homeowners and more people with who can afford a house. So.
And Lottie, you were telling us that there was one issue on which you didn't know what Rishi Sunak thought. And what was that?
Well, I do think the whole abortion thing that was brought to light today has kind of not like, I mean, obviously he made a good case. I understand that when you're Chancellor, you can't vote. But,
we're running out of time. That's really interesting. Thank you all for talking to us tonight. Now back to you, Jane.
Thanks very much, Tamara. Well, let's have a final chat with our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. So, Sam, this is the last of the big official discussions with the media and these two candidates. Where does it leave us in this campaign?
Well, I think tonight we really got a sense of what this race is about. Look, to characterise it, it was Mr Sensible versus the disruptor, the traitor versus the Boris Johnson loyalist, predictable versus unpredictable. Look, as we saw from the show of hands at the end of that debate, Rishi Sunak won the room. He was probably smoother, but there are also more challenges and more nervous moments, I thought, with Liz Truss. Her inability sometimes to explain, to apologise, to characterise why she's ended up doing what she's done, damaged her amongst the people that looked up close. But all the way through this race, people in the Conservative Party have been weighing up what Rishi Sunak did in government and how he behaved at the end versus Liz Truss. Just the view, I think, of Boris Johnson amongst many of the Conservative Party membership, their enduring fondness for him still has a big place in this leadership contest.
Sam, thanks very much. Well, what an interesting evening it has been. That is all from us here in this studio after a special programme on the battle for number 10 where we heard that Liz Truss said the predicted recession is not inevitable. She wouldn't apologise to Nicola Sturgeon, whilst Rishi Sunak won over the Sky News audience. Gillian Joseph's coming up next with lots more analysis.